So I would like to, before I start, have a casual chat with you. So anyone who said the last week the exam, how about your experience, right, with the new syllabus that whatever I think tax and financial reporting's already last Sunday, right? Sunday, that paper is already finished. So how about your experience? Anyone who said that financial reporting or this tax paper? Comment, can you share? Even you want to talk, even you like, put the comment. How about feel new syllabus papers? So I would like hear from you. Hello, online. Yes, yes. Rishada, Achala Sanjeevani. No, all of you are in the this coming Saturday, right? The first experience in the new syllabus. Hello. So ACR paper different from pilot paper. Have to read lot of paper to answer. The question very hard to manage paper in the 3 hours. Comes now. All right, that is why. So that's the why my you also develop your questions. Some very first paper I release, right? So that number of the bulkier words, right? But you have to tackle. I will tell how to tackle advanced risk management paper in such a scenario. Definitely, your paper also it would be right because that is because now is it's not the pre-seen unseen paper, right? You go and there read, but if you are reading, the answer also there, right? That is why bulkier words are putting, right? Your answer also you have scenario to extract, right? Now our paper also same story, so that is happening. That's you have to tackle and you have to logically think and your approach. I will tell how to this tackle, right? This advanced risk management. Any others? Others? Only Sameera. Others comment. You want to comment or you can you can talk, right? So that is why first anyone we release first paper, right? Mock paper. Anyone who is not received first one, please let me know. Mahesh, hello. All of you, Achala, you received our first mock paper, and then Risha, the right. I think I properly pronounced. Karanavada, you received our first mock paper. All of you received because I will tell next 2 days what is the plan, right? I will next 2 and 2.5 hours how to tackle, right? That is I will do, but yes, sir, received. Achala, right, good. You another one also, please. Can you confirm? Because if you're not within the break, I will take in this session in the 10 minutes break. So at that time, I can share, right? So because I want with the two papers, you have to go with the exam. So that is very strategically I developed these two papers, right, according with your syllabus. So I will tell how to tackle this. With that, anyone first not received, please confirm so we can share, right? So we are now positioned to share the first paper, but we already publicly share, and I don't know whether so, Rishad, right? I am pronounced correct. That you receive the first one? Yeah, not answer, right? Not no comments, right? Okay, right. Then have all of you individually try this. At least read and logically things you didn't. So that is one of the expectation. Why that is we release. So hope you're right. You at least what is the content there, right? So hope experience you. So that paper examination experience condition if you attempt. So that is my ultimate objective. But at least you read and logically point out in the A4 paper. So that is also right. This okay, right? So with that, so further now I will start, right? So this there are a number of so patient, not 2.5 hours because I'm in the today on the studio. So I'm also like you, right? Today conducting sitting. So then hours no point. Anytime can continue at least 2.5 hours. We do will effective, right? Will effective session, right? So Karanagoda, can you confirm you to visible my presentation? Karanagoda, yes, chat. Yes, sir, visible, right? Thank you, right? So because just I want to jump in the mock paper too, right? Be patient, right? So, but we started in the journey not now, not yesterday, last week, last month, right? This is a February first week to the like almost 5 month journey. So with that, so today is the conclude day, right? With that, so I think not fully visible, right? I will PowerPoint presentation now is okay, right? So okay, right? So this is some of paper discussion. So I share with this now only we starting the revision session even a 50 plus date, right? Now is 2 days remaining. Don't worry, forecast today, success tomorrow, right? So you two I will say how next 2 days how you tackle with this subject, how do you go through, how what you have to do, right? So I will help, right? Help you to you're gonna this subject to pass. Be patient, right? That is my so kind request. Be patient, right? This is our program, right? So our program with the revision program. This is today's session of the part of that in the last session. So we did the very overview first 5 session and then the mock exam that is why but physically very people very negatively like to examination condition, right? Sometimes this is this 3 months journey you are think something we stay and we read and get the understanding better, right? Sometimes you are thinking even this time is okay, right? So but so anyhow we did that also, right? Paper two, right? Before now, so next session, right? So in Karnataka also there, and our theory student is not there, right? They will watch the what is called this recording video as a practice, revision and note. So, but I know you are in the exams that is called pressure. No, I know this. I also come from your stage, right? So, what pressure? So you face, I know, right? This, but that is journey, right? Hard work journey. So you are now in the final stage with the 1 or 2 papers, right? With that, so before it's the theoretical, serious discussion. So I would like to some motivational things I want to share with you, right? So with that, 3 minutes I will want from you, right? To less than 3 minutes, but this is I will share in the one of the motivational video. I think the CA student so relevant for the any student any part of the world, right? So this video in the visuals language, I don't know, male, especially Kannada like me, so can understand, but others, I don't know, females, something this language may can understand, right? So, but visual, so it's what is called music is not the one country, one religions, like one nations, right? This called universal language, right? With that, so I will share one of the videos now, less than 2 minutes. Please watch and watch the visual, right? Then read some word going there, right? For you to motivation purpose, I sharing. I know this time and this period very tough and stressful time. So I think this I choose I selected this video for you to motivate purpose, right? Is there a story about the CA, any CA student with it then video, their visuals, your things you memorize in the after your results, those visual there, right? So then after 1 years, the next neighbor building, right? CA Sri Lanka, convocation. So you can visualize that. Further, I want to tell about these things, right? So this is one of the today's structure program. Wait, right? So right. So that part also there, right? So one day will become a CA. So that is our target, right? So now we are in the final movement. So this is also I want to place, right? Now first paper also share. Even second also now discussing. So I want to this disclaimer recording this video also. This examination paper is a mock assessment prepared solely for the education and the examination practice purpose. All company names, organization, individual scenarios, and case studies presented here in the entirely fictitious and do not represent any actual entity, right? Person or event. So that's I want to right. And also in reference to the legal bodies, legislation, accounting standard, professional guideline, or industry best practices are included slowly to the provided content and realism to the hypothetical scenario and should not be constructed as official guidance, legal advice, so endorsed by any such body or organization, right? That I need to because we build the hypothesis scenario. So PLC, we have to say this is a listed company. Likewise, regulation, lot of things, right? So I will even a reading question. I will explain for this only for creation hypothetically educations. So purpose only, right? So that is examination practice purpose only. So then I want to first explain. I think we share with that our core theme across mock paper one, right? Enterprises risk management framework, cyber security risk governance, and the corporate governance code, regulatory compliance, also internal control frameworks, fraud risk management, professional ethics, NOCLA, right? Foreign exchange, treasury risk management, audit committee, internal audit function effectiveness, ESG, sustainability reporting and assurance. What is the role of the ESG point of view, internal auditor, right? So likewise, so this is the first uh, first paper theme, right? I remember first organization. So this is the one of the conglomerate, right? Most probably your case also like, right? Even pilot also same, no? 5 6 5 4 5 business entity with the holding company. So then you have to, so this first question part one come from the risks identified, right? For that purpose, we have to read all the 4 5. Even in my case, I say at least three business unit. We have to identify the risk. Then that kind of scenario, you have to even a three read. Then you can provide the answers, right? So that is first, and then I can't this orderly, but in the one of the insurance company, right? Protect life insurance, right? One of the other highly regulated industry, right? And then the NBFI, BL Finance, right? That is also regulated, central bank regulated. So and then other one is the best healthcare. So this is one of the other also private healthcare. So those one of the highly regulated, right? Private healthcare authority there. So no environmental control authority, right? So this even my experience 15 years past, so I'm attached to Sri Lankan leading two healthcare organization, right? And then another two NBFI, that's called non-banking financial institution. All are, that is even put last disclaimer and copyright because all are not none of not copying any of the papers, right? Because this is a brand new subject, no past papers. All are my experience, what I practically that working experience with identified issued facts and all. So I use for the develop the all questions, right? So that is those especially healthcare and the NBFI. So That is how you have to understand this. You are subject for 10% regulator compliance and legal framework, right? We talk about the public interest, right? You can't public interest talk about bank finance, right? Number one. And then the insurance, because they are not issuing share to the public, collecting public money and run the business. So that is how gravity of the in term of the public interest, right? Definitely see a pilot paper also, if you finance company, definitely come, right? So those industry will come, you to get the understanding. So, this industry, that is like multiple industry, you can see after the second paper, you are learn number of industry in Sri Lanka, right? Key industries. So two paper also, that is why you will receive first. Next we can do, right, that content one of the I choose one of the now first you already discussed about conglomerate. Now my second one I choose bank with another two subsidiary, right? Bank with the two subsidiary, but most your case may be the other type of what first type of conglomerate. But if there are a worst case, this also can, but even sometimes with 25 questions, bank can come, right? Because highest public interest entity, right? So with the local and global issues, I incorporated this developing these questions, right? So that is one of the responsibility and duty, right? You have to explain, right? So with the and also next second question of the mock paper two come to the multinational telco, right? Connect PLC multinational telco because we have multinational company Tessera role because I want to test it. I select the multinational Tessera and regulated ERC and all there. Then another NBFI, that means finance company, and then other e-commerce company, right? One of the e-commerce, this doing the business with the online and apps, right? Those are one of the fast growing industry, but high vulnerability to the risk point of view, fraud and things, cyber security could happen, right? So that is how I develop all the two papers, right? So with and I want to quoting this, this paper, first paper is talk about the fraud matter in the bank, right? So fraud is not the panic, right? So that is I want to highlight you too. So this is one of the I extracted from the ACFE, that is called Associate Certified Fraud Examiner, right? The international organization. So their qualification for the Certified Fraud Examiner. So that they issue the report to the nations, right? And what they report, they are based on their members survey. So they publish this report. You to Google it. Not now, after exam, you can Google and you can go through understanding, especially Kannada. So attaching to the general department. So you arrive to knowledge you can extract, right? By doing other who is to other also there, right? And then the 5% of the they say 5% of the revenue is the fraud, right? That is the estimation. So there is a benchmark that 5% is going number of years. That's the benchmark, right? Then is Sri Lanka to something for this panic, but in the global, this is not the panic, right? Panic situation. Any organization, like that's a benchmark, 5% of revenue, there are possibility, right? So that I want to explain because that. So with that, another two slide I will use because I know theory student. I will share this article also. They to learn for forensic, for risk management, and the digital forensic. But in the revisions, you all are not this to get the understanding about the forensic. I two slide to explain this right. Here my case also I explain about this, right? Ask question about the forensic point. But traditional assurance was the forensic investigations, right? Do you have to know the objective? Traditional audit, insurance compliance with the accounting standard, right? The forensic talk about the investigating potential fraud, misconduct, and irregularities, right? The forensic report most probably is the, most probably the more forensic is reporting the court, right? That is going for the court. So criminal prosecutions follow with the forensic report, and also, there are any country, any part of the world forensic. So that country governors called Evidence Ordinance Act, right? There is a act called any country Evidence Ordinance Act. So your that findings should be based on the Evidence Ordinance Act because this report challenged by other side lawyer, right? This is how forensic is, critical and crucial. So you can't say, blah blah word as per according to those words now know in the forensic, right? Facts and finding base, right? Your evidence should be a digital evidence, even a documentary evidence, testimonial evidence, right? Testimonial documents and digital evidence more priority, but the testimonial evidence mean those statement you obtaining from the poster. He says sometimes I did committed fraud, right? This kind of statement as a natural investigation process we obtain. But if they are in a court, those can challenge, right? Until we have a proper documentary or digital evidence, the testimonial is not high ranking priority come from the digital and documented evidence. Then the testimonial come in the later, right? So that is also keep in mind because you giving that can't say otherwise say argument say he's not at that time will mentally deliver right pressure. So say like this, right? So it can happen, right? That is how I want to explain about the forensic and other audit. Scope for routing and surface level in the procedure in the traditional audit, but in the target deep dive examination on the specific financial activities, right? So forecast accuracy or overreaching the financial statement, indicating of the embezzlement, money laundering, bribery, misappropriation of the asset like this. Outcome was a professional assurance compliance, actionable legal evidence, and expert testimony, right? So as you are the forensic auditor, you have to quote, right? So there is expert witness we have to provide, but your output, right? So there is a job was a forensic auditor. It is about the forensic audit and the assurance normal traditional audit. Is understandable, Karnaval? It's okay because I want to give some understandable. You, yeah, okay, right? Forensic and this traditional audit. Is it clear? So yes, right. Okay, yeah. This is because sometimes there may you also put the question that is a different, but sometimes they may test, right? Possibility there, but no, don't ask how blue forensic can know, right? Now I explain that enough for you to get the understand, right? Traditional this and also. So this is also you can take a, but this the one time take a mind, na, not again reading. Don't waste time today's session, right? This session itself is taken to your mind, right? That is my expectation. Forensic investigation law. That is what is the process? Document examination, scrutinizing ledgers, invoice, and the contracts to identify the initial discrepancies. Data analytics. Deploying advanced techniques to uncover the hidden trend. So realizations and anomalies, right? You can use ACL and all, right? There are other forensic tools also, right? Interview and interrogation, right? Engaging the employee and the management to clarify the discrepancy and gather the human intelligence. So then red flags investigation, root cause analysis, unexplained expenses, fictitious vendors, revenue, unusual ratios, the reporting and legal support, right? Finding into the detailed report and providing expert testimonial for the legal proceeding. So that is how happening in the forensic, right? This is a court report. You are in your audit report, evidence audit act by. So I saw how the important evidence audit act use back to your evidence, right? So that is how as per according to those words you can, right? Fact finding reports, right? So fact based and facts and some rules also they are backed by this violate. You can say like that, right? Then all right. This is the end of the our formal right session with this this hand. So now both of you are there, right? Now we come. So now hello, both of you can talk. If you want any clarification, you can ask. So you can want to if you can't ask, you can put the message, text message. That is also any clarifications. Are you now okay? Hello, hello. Are you now okay? Hello. Some- Okay, sir. Right. Okay, right. Thank you. So that is connection with the it's important. So me to continue. So with that, right now just I want to jump in some areas you to touch. So with that. Now some of this analysis. Don't this also share the weight because this all. So, so Sameera and Akmal, there's a lot of Sameeras, right? Hello, hello. Is it visible to the mock paper too? Hello, is it visible? Yes, visible, sir. Right, Tony. Thank you. Right now, so I want to even I share now we share the YouTube also one of the video, right? Exam tips for the effective examination. 1 hour you can speed then so you can watch that also, right? Some understanding for there, but we discuss some action verbs and all there, right? So with that, so this is the paper. Right. So just before going to the paper, so now you are saying, this huge information and all right there, right? So that's how you have to reading. You have to be smart, right? So yeah, okay. So hope you do clear my voice, right? Can you confirm that also, visible and hello? I want to loudly speak. Or is it okay? Clear to you? Is it voice clear? Further need to loudly speak. Hello. Yes, because I saw the exam success video in the today morning. It is very effective to us. Thank you, sir. Okay, right. And then you have to smart, right? This don't worry, this paper will release to you, right? After this session. Don't worry, but we are very smart to tentative papers, right? Very some areas, some things, coding with the local and global issues. Even CA history, they are not testing, right? One of the I told previously, even one of the hospital Sri Lanka auditor disclaimer audit report, right? Though that's come to the CA report. CA very updated things test. Even I heard my tax lecture say IMF things and all right there, right? So that is a CA standing. So we also have to stand with that, right? That is my expectation. That is but today list. You have 2 days, so don't worry, right? Now no need to read any notes you're in yeah after, right? So that how you read this question, right? Any question, very first two sentence, what they give the organization. What is the organization? How is structure, and then how the regulator of that industry, right? So then that is then one time reading enough. Now this case, we all also I request to read the first question about Trust Bank PLC, right? So, right, we had say Trust Bank PLC and it is subsidiaries, right? Trust Bank is a leading licensed commercial banks incorporated in the listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange, Sri Lanka, and the balance sheet exceeded 1 trillion, right? Total assets and island-wide branch networks and 120 branch bank products. Portfolio spanned retail, SME banking, including leasing facility, personal loan, gold-backed loan, SME business loan, and recently launched solar power purchase loan, right? Scheme aligned with the national renewable energy agenda. The bank is regulated by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, right? Those there is I say disclaimer put because I can't with this bank talk without PAC without these things can't, right? But we have to professionally disclaimer that is I did, right? You can understand why those right dash use, right? And they align with the commitment of the sustainable finance and responsible banking practice, the TBP, right? The trust bank, right? Now TBP intend to launch a green bond issuance value at LKR 10 billion. which will be listed on the Colombo Stock Exchange. The proceeds of the green bond are expected to finance the expansion of the solar energy sector and other sustainable financing products, supporting environmental responsible project and accelerating the transition to the low carbon economy. The landmark initiative to reinforce the bank commitment to the environmental sustainability while contributing to the national sustainable development objective and providing investor with the opportunity to participate in the environmental focused investment that offer the long-term value creation potential, right? Now you can understand, right, how developing this, you're a bank I choose, then you know what topic about sustainability, right? So that is why I hope ACR report, financial reporting, there are a number of questions, right? That I connect to this case, right? Sustainability. So then hope you to have understand now is that subsidiary we talk, trust bank and subsidiary, and then so trust banks group comprising the bank and the two wholly owned subsidiary, right? Trust fund management private limited, the fund management arms of the group which manage the money market fund and then the income fund and operate under the trading name and the trust fund management. So companies licensed by the Security and Exchange, they are requirement and when the trust management company distribute the fund primarily through the bank branch network, right? And the second subsidiary, trust property management, the real estate arm of the group responsible for managing property owned by the bank, including the bank is flagship asset Trust Tower, right? Trust Tower. Trust Tower is the 40-story landmark commercial building located in the heart of the Colombo. Of the 40 floors, the bank occupies the 4 floors in the head office function and the flagship branch, while the remaining 36 floor are like leases out to the external corporate tenant, right? Corporate tenant. Keep in mind, now corporate tenant generating the significant non-banking rental income and these things, right? Group level, right? So group organization is structure, business mix, right? The group organizational structure, business mix, and the reliant on the technological driving processing across the lending treasury and the payment make it representative of the complex systematically sorry this right now is systematically important financial conglomerate operating in the emerging market. Right now, you have to think, right? These things you to give the common, brief about the organization, how they are subsidiaries, then future plan there in the green bond issue. Right now, too much you want to again go and read, right? You know industry, how complexity, how subsidiaries they are, right? Now, what you have to do in the first sentence, like you read, so you go to get directly from this, right? Yeah, this is directly from the question, right? So using the fact set out in the case study, right? Exhibit 1 to 2 about answer the all of the following, pick first question compulsory. Then you have to read this, right? Because definitely first question part A, you have to read number of entities, right? Because asked from the risk, most probably they asked from the one with the multiple other subsidiary also connected risk you have to right. For that purpose, you have to read, right? That is my first requirement, right? First question A, we need to have multiple sub business unit. You have to read and identify the risk. You can understand what is this questions all action law by identified and evaluate the major risk faced by the trust bank and it is true subsidiary, right? Arising from the case study, from each risk identified, classified by risk category and assess the it is severity and the velocity, right? Those and using the high, medium, low rating with the justification, right? Recommend the appropriate remedial actions and risk management study for the each major risk identified. Right? That is question, this type of question, but maybe industry different, but high possibility, right? But velocity and these two words like being, pilot paper also are sometimes student panic, right? If you answer discussing, this is not the panic, right? The impact of severity and the velocity over the speed of this incident could happen, right? That is why if your cyber security velocity is high, right? Because cyber things very quick happen. No? So that is impact is right. That is also sometimes according with the fraud impact very high. Now this bank fraud is very high. There is a financial impact very high, right? So that is why regulator some major regulation, impact is high, right? Likewise, you to justify, right? That answer I will discuss, you can understand, right? Now your approach like this should be. Up to now is clear? Voice is okay, right? So, is clear? Up to now, okay? Clear? Hello? Is it okay? So please explain the definition in the singular velocity. So that singular velocity. So let's say velocity and right. Singular. This is the impact and how impact is බලපෑමනේ කොහොමද වල බලපාන්නේ impact එක. කොච්චර මූල්‍යමය අවාසියක් වෙනවද? right? මම මේක 100% කියලා දන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක තමයි බලපෑමනේ. financial impact එක මොකක්ද? බලපෑම මොකක්ද? මේක right? ස්පීඩ් එක කියන්නේ ස්පීඩ් of onset කියන්නේ කොච්චර ඉක්මනින් මේක වෙනවද right කොච්චර ස්පීඩ් එක කියන එක කොච්චර ඉක්මනින් වෙනවද සයිබර් සිකියුරිටි එකක් ඔයාගේ අපි හිතමු that we think right we think ඔයාගේ cyber security attack එක ඔයා organization what is online right like say pick me Uber like organization name the cyber attack එකක් කව මොකක්ද ඔයාට වෙන speed of the you know වෙන impact එක right and again, speedily how is onset happening, right? That's velocity. Right. If you are the answer explain further, you will understand. I know this is complexity there, right? I separately two word explain and starting the questions, answering the patient. Is up to now is okay. Hello? Identify potential risk. We have to use the heat map to category. Yeah, that is why. Now, okay, sir. Right, that is why. Because of don't worry, because we start in the identify risk. I explained that session, right? End of the risk heat map, that is the ultimate product, right? According to you, race placing, right? Sometimes you can say, matrix use and placing the risk, right? High, low, medium, right? Now you racing according with this, right? So there is a high, but answering you will realize, right? Be patient. So that is how this word use. I know some student may panic. That is I put to here you to get the more clarification and understanding, right? So this is the how first question, right? Now already you all clear, right? Now area is raining, right? Hope we do not disturb, right? Because hope then I will speed up also. I don't know, thundering and power cut or something happen, disturbance can happen, right? So that purpose I will quickly going. So to then the part B, right? Discuss the role of the board of directors in maintaining the adequacy of the internal control of financial reporting, right? And trust bank. Evaluate the oversight role of the board audit committee should have exercise in relation to the integrity of the financial reporting with the specific reference to the exhibit one. Now you can read one. Now here this type of comma you to refer, you read, then you can answer, right? You can understand that. Then explain how trust bank should manage the interest rate risk, right? This one of the industry specific one I put, right? Someone you don't, right? If you can't understand, please keep aside, right? That, but in the industry one I talking here, like the D with reference to trust property management company, right? Now going to other one, right? Subsidiary. Identify the compliance, AML, KYC weaknesses, right? Tenant leasing operations. Exhibit 3, right? Propose the risk management strategy. Company should be adopted. Discuss the role of the chief internal auditor in fraud risk management and the trust bank management, right? Assess the execution of which role appear to have been effectively discharged, right? Very practical paper. You first when you this, but don't we will issue don't by heart memorize, right? That will be a killer strategy. But try to you to logically think and how you apply it. So that you develop based on this two paper. Don't only 27. Don't be a big task for you, right? Because very high standard I preparing this two paper, right? So you evaluate the scope of the coverage of the trust bank or the IT audit functions, right? All the information there, right? Now you have to get the understanding how to approach and discuss the chief risk officer. Chief risk officer role in the corporate governance, right? Keep in mind that, right? So then the justify the with reference to leading practice, the concern the trust bank. Why the bank such as trust bank need to establish a dedicated forensic auditing and fraud risk management unit as a distinct unit within the internal audit department rather than the relying on the existing general internal audit function, right? Very broader. You to think practically, right? This is the question I put in connecting with the forensic, right? For risk management. So, right, this is a 50 marks question, right? Now, shall we read this all three scenario, right? Hello? Together read that, then easy, one by one I don't use, but you can like this, right? Hello? So your comment or your connectivity I would like. So someone is left. Karnagoda only now, others also left, right? Hello? Karnagoda. No, hello. Karnagoda. I'm here. Okay. You to clear, right? Hello? Okay. Clear, right? Okay, right. Because now is raining and all going, lighting and all happens, people leave, I don't know what happened up to now, okay, right? We'll see, right? But you also read this recent event at the Trust Bank PLC, the payment reconciliation fraud, right? I told you fraud is not the panic. Any part of the world happen, even the bank like this, go most of the fraud happen like this. Even the banks not taken, wallet money and do fraud, right? Like, Horana recently do, those are very one day can detect. But these things very complex and, that nature, so very difficult to identify, right? That is one of the common nature, right? That is I want to highlight. The first part of this and the trust bank publicly disclosed that is uncover significant internal fraud with the cumulative value now estimating the LKR 15 million perpetrator over the period of more than 3 years, right? Fraud happened. They continue. The fraud first came to the light through the whistleblower complaint submitted through the bank confidential ethical hotline rather than through a bank own control and audit process. Now you have to read. This is a good word, right? Rather than the through bank or control and audit process, because what is highlighting that mean bank something issue within the existing control and auditing process, right? That mean auditing mean internal audit process, right? So that is the highlighting this. We have to keep in mind, right? Those things will realize in the next scenario we'll discuss, right? Backed by the evidence, right? Subsequent investigation supported by the external forensic accounting firm established the following. The fraud was executed through the creation of the fictitious suspend account entities within the payment processing system, which were used to divert the customer remittance and the internal settlement fund into the account controlled by the perpetrator, right? Those are happening. Ship on. There is a bank happening. Bank happening, fake customer create, fake accounts to, money, tax haven countries, right? Those no persons, only PO box and name, those company to transfer money, those things happening, right? That is how bank fraud happen, right? Big fraud, right? It's not to panic and not one industry I'm here focusing. If you are reading any bank fraud 10, this 8 of scenario, this is right. So not no one taken, local money, right? That approach not there. So with that the scheme required, right? The fraud was executed through, right? Those are scheme is required to obtain the collusion of the staff, the separately function information technology, who modify the system access right and the, supersede the exceptional reporting alert and finance who approve the annual journal entries to the clear the suspend balance without adequate supporting documents and the payment processing and reconciliation department who staff initiate and approve the underlying fraudulent transaction, ensure the reconciliation between the core banking system and the ledgers are not performed, were not for falsifying the affected accounts, right? Outstanding reconciliation item in the suspense and nostro clearing accounts, right? Nostro clearing, special account, those are sometimes, this talk about the, foreign country, foreign bank to settle for the import, export, remittance purpose, cross-border settlement, right? That is a word can say, like kind of account, bank account, no, bank to bank settle. If ATM withdraw one bank to other bank account, then bank have to settle like locally, globally also like this, right? So they are that this well and for each for the period of considerable exceed of the bank on policy threshold, there is a policy, right? Threshold and without the escalation to the senior management or board audit committee, right? Segregation of duty between the transaction initiation, authorization, reconciliation had eroded over the time through the informal workaround and the shared the system credential, right? Password, well, those things very common, right? Password, login access sharing. And then the bank internal audit function has last performed the full scope review of the for payment reconciliation process more than 24 months, right? That means delay performing that area for the discovery of the fraud, and the IT general control, logical assessment, access management, change management, privilege user monitoring had not been independently tested as a part of the internal audit circle. You can think now first two word, right? Now it's a back car. Say like two word we mentioned no? What is I told this bank own control and audit process, right? Rather than through a bank own control and audit process, right? You can understand. Now what happened? Following the public disclosure in line with the regulatory notification requirement, the leading rating agency downgrade the trust bank, the national long-term credit rating by two notch, right? Two notch mean now technical word, say like this bank double A, right? So double A mean, so first going to the double A minus and then double A plus, right? That means double A to double A plus going, that is called two notch, right? That is a word, right? With the understanding. So with that, this is IT weaknesses, they are happening. This thing, weaknesses in the governance, internal control, operation, risk management, trading in the bank share was temporary halt, Colombo, these things, and bank classification announcement. This seems required to the bank to submit the remedial plan, right? Remediation plan and placed the bank under the enhanced supervisory monitoring. That is, they are enhanced supervisory monitoring, right? Separately, and in the course of the border investigation, the bank identified know your customer KYC failure relating to small number of account belong to the politically exposed person and several other major corporate customer in these cases. So then periodic KYC refresh review had not been carried out within the time frame prescribed by the bank on AML, CFT policy and financial intelligence of the Sri Lankan customer, Sri Lanka customer due diligence rules, right? So, and sources of the fund documentation for certainly large transaction could not be located, right? Now you can understand bank related things, right? So there is a bank. Hello? So you are there, right? Karnagada. Karnagada, end of the, hello? Are you there? Hello? Karnagada? Yes, right. You are okay, right? Anything to clear? You, if you are reading this thing, read that, but you try to get the more explained, right? Just some, okay, so, right? Some explaining, right? So this is the how it happened, right? With that, this is the first scenario, right? Then a second subsidiary, first subsidiary trust fund management, operating challenges, right? Operating challenges. Trust fund is the group fund management subsidiary, manage the money market fund and income fund on behalf of the retail and the institutional unit holders. In the week of the parent bank fraud disclosure, the subsidiary board and the management have flagged the following challenges to group risk committee, right? Those words you can see. Group risk committee, right? Your paper also advanced risk management and corporate governance, right? Reputational contingents, right? Contingent, the unit holders in the money market fund and income fund have raised concern regarding the safety of their investment, and the subsidiary has experienced a notable increase in the redemption requests since the bank fraud was reported in the press, and raising the concern and liquidity management concern for the underlying fund, right? Now is happening. Related party and conflict of the interest exposure. A portion of the money market fund portion portfolio is invested in the fixed deposit and commercial paper issued by the trust bank, right? Subsidiary fund management company issue invested by the trust bank, right? That means call this the commercial paper and fixed deposit, raising the question around the independent of the investment decisions making related by transaction approval, whether the exposure limit to the parent law being the independent monitor, valuation and disclosure risk with the market reaction of the rating downgrade of the present, the fair valuation of the bank related instrument held within the fund have come under the scrutiny, raising the risk of the mispricing of the net asset value communicated to the unit holders, right? Governance and recognition. resourcing, trust fund management operate with the thing in the very small, the share service model, relying on the bank, IT infrastructure, internal function, compliance officer, and the metrics on a metric basis, raising the question about the independent and adequacy of the second line and third line defense. Giving the control weaknesses now evidence in the group level, right? You can understand those who are reading, unfortunately, today I'm not the this, so I can't, these things to using, I will not take, right? You have to highlight it, right? Depend. That's word are very critical, independent. The adequacy of the second line and third line depends, given in the control weaknesses now evidence at the group level, right? Second line is called chief compliance officer, chief risk officer. Third line, chief internal auditor, right? So that is how function wise also same, right? That is how second and third line. Regulator scrutiny. The SEC is, as indicated, it will conduct a thematic review of the fund management company and affiliated within the banking group following the disclosure, increment, near terms compliance, and supervisory engagement cost of the TFM, right? So third one is a trust property management, right? So concerning though this is a trust property management, manage the group own real estate portfolio, right? Real estate portfolio. Keep in mind there is a call in the designation, right? Call, right, that word designations, non-financial business and persons for the AML right? So that is a come like real estate, but this is something hybrid model, right? So here justification I put, right? Someone can say this rented company no need to AML right? But here I arguably put this things in the scenario. We go looking at the volume in the looking of the transaction of this subsidiary and the nature of this subsidiary. This is belong to one of the bank, right? That bank is public money conducting some exposure in this. So directly impact there. No, this Sri Lankan, like these previous in the finance and all era, there are a number of companies, the Selinco group. So how it's happening, right? One company, that is not the something, but whole group impact, right? So then concern, so point of view, so I here justifiable argument put, right? So that is I want to tell, right? We can argue this, but their property there, right? With the huge amount rental payment, corporate clients, I highlighted top with that. So we can best practice we can use, right? So that is why, right? Ensure the proper compliance within the company, right? The comment I want to put, right? Being the trust and which 36 Pro, 44, right? Located, these things, this very first sentence I will not tell, right? And then I will say conduct a routine compliance review. The conduct shortly after the bank for disclose as a part of the group-wide control health check, right? Now incident happened, Sri Lanka. The incident happened, so people are go and look, right? That is the nature, right? That is Sri Lankan people go and something happen and go. But prevention is better than detection, right? Organization, country, or whatever we have drive the prevention, right? Prevention is better than detection. But our approach, our attitude, Sri Lankan, something happen, go and look for things like this. That is a good. But prevention is most important, right? That comment also I put. But is that part of group-wide, to ensure the control in the group or other organization, the group-wide control health check, identify the following issue within the treasury, trust fund, trust property management company, right? Tenant onboarding process, right? What are the tenant onboarding process? Several corporate, tenant occupying flow in the first trust power onboarding without and the without full beneficiary ownership justification, right? I will tell in the compliance now in the this company act also new amendment talk about the beneficial ownership, right? With the major shareholding 10% like that. So criteria that say you annually now share with the annual return, normally share in previous annual return. Now we have to attach with the beneficial ownership, right? Return you have to share what is who are the beneficial owner, address, those information you have to share, right? So just the only organization, there is a risk, right? Who are backed by that company? Are they money launderers? Those are drugs dealers, right? Who are robbers, right? You have to know, right? Even like this bank part of the business, this property company, definitely they should have to know this. If something escalate, this bank also impact, right? their reputation also impact, right? Now, we have gravity of this can understand, right? So it's relying on solely on the certificate of the incorporation and the signature of the company secretary, and with no look throughout the ultimate individual beneficial owners, right? Sometimes that's why now reason was a fraud. Now identifying they say huge amount transfer into the other Sri Lanka to other country, but some few company, right? So those companies sometimes PO box and all, right? That is a use. When money laundering session I discussion I told no, they are tax seven country. They are a country like PO box name, no people, no nothing work happening, but this smuggling things purpose using, right? That is also given, right? So now it's happening, Sri Lanka, most of the cyber scammers, right? With the paradise in Sri Lanka, say, right? A lot of things, other nations people are identified, right? Recently. Those are very, very prominent apartment and all, right? That is also that point of also good, no? In the publishing, that department reputation damage, things happening, right? That is also key, right? But no, then raising deposit and advance rental from the this now I reading, right? Second sentence, the lease deposit and the advance rental from the number of tenants and including amount running into the several 100 million rupees, right? 100 million rupees, right? You can understand value were accepted in the third party bank transfer, right? Third party bank transfer, that is risk in the last two instances in a cash without in-house due diligence being performed and suspicious transaction assessment being documented, right? So then the property management, trust property manager does not currently operate in the formal customer risk rating methodology and is screening tenant or their beneficial owners against the sanction. Step 4, adverse media watch list, maintaining document, AMS, CFT policy is on, or the historically realized on the informal assumption that AML KYC banking matter, right? Handled at the group level, right? Group level handled and not directly applicable to the property leasing entity. No periodical refresh or ongoing monitoring on the tenant information in the perform over the life of the lease, notwithstanding that several lease run for terms of the 5 years or longer, right? That is, you can think longer and involve the material recurring cash flows. TMP has no designated compliance officer, AML reporting lines also that review that it is the not registered as a reporting institution that is despite, not even mind, despite arguably failing within the scope of the relevant business under applicable this regulation given the skill and nature of the rental receipt, right? Arguably, right now, this someone can say, but as a student, you can write this how important looking this whole parent company and this nature, volume of the cash receipt, nature of the cash receipt, who are the client, right? With that, so you can use, right? So I'm only talking this how is happening this Karnagada. So are you okay? Hello, Karnagada. It's okay. Karnagada. Okay, sir. Right. Okay. Right now you have this the way you have to approach, right? So now to so how you can tackle these things, right? So I will so these all the questions now with the answers we'll discuss, right? So now you also have some memorized things, right? Me too. I don't think simultaneous you can share the both paper and questions, right? But anyhow, so I will share the this question also some sheet, right? So is this visible to the this Karnavada? Karnavada. Hello, I'm coming back to you. Visible, sir, right? Okay, right. So this is how this very first you have other thing also I want to tell, right? Now you have mark hundreds, but you will receive the 125, right? Marks question no. That is also keep in mind because 3 out of 2 want to you do, right? That means your syllabus not the 100% test. Beyond that area, sometimes 45 is maybe 50, 55 they should be, right? Otherwise, can't 125%. No. Then you to selecting question also be careful, this Karanagar, right? Because what you have to do, so you have to, what is your most capable areas you pick, right? What to has a scan. I will explain that, effective video. I hope you watch, highest what you can out of two pick in the three, right? So that is also keep in mind, not the exact level, more than that you have to question there, otherwise use out selection there, 3 to 2, right? So that is also keep in mind, and also keep in mind my first question, other than the ethics, your other 90% there, right? That means regulator compliance there, internal audit there, advanced risk management there, corporate governance there, 90% components related area there, and it is also keep in mind. So right, okay, hello, are you okay? Okay, right, okay, right. So this, this is one of the, uh, what are the major risks of the trust bank, and it is subsidiary based, right? There is a first question right now we discussed that. So you to get the understanding this side frameworks, then velocity, I do you also ask something people are severity, right? Those are something is a bit panic, but severity refer to the magnitude, impact, right, of the risk event, right? It occur, right? How much financial loss? Now you can understand how much financial loss could occur, right? How much reputation damage could result? How severe would be operational disruption, right? You can understand now, right? I mean, this now you to more clear, right? You can. This is how severity assess, right? Tricky question we have to ask: how much financial loss could occur? How much reputational damage could result? How severe would be operational disruption be, right? So that is how called severity, right? That is called severity. That is why magnetic word you can say impact, right? So it's the how financial impact, right? That is also thing for you, right? It's one side, but other also there, right? That is why I say how financial impact, and then how much reputational damage could result. That is why non-compliance, regulator compliance. So this is one of the high risks, right? High severity. Some are below, but most of things industry specific high, right? So recently you can think one of the even leasing company, right? That is cooperative leasing, right? Central bank is cancel license, right? That is how you can understand, right? Compliance how important, right? High how is practically. So then the velocity also refer to the speed at which the risk impact to the organization. Once the event occur, right? That means how quickly will the impact to the felt. Will management have time to respond, right? That is all about the velocity, right? Will management have time? Then how quickly will the impact be felt, right? That is all about the velocity, right? Speed at which risk impact the organization once the event occur, right? The risk assessment should consider the likelihood, that means probability occurrence, impact, severity, extent of the potential loss, damage, and velocity. So velocity talk about the speed at which risk materialize and affect the organization, right? Enabling the management to prioritize the risk, allocate the resources effectively. Prioritize the risk. But we talk about the allocate the risk. So let's talk about the what I discussed one slide, you right? There is a goal. Risk heat map, right? You put in place in there. What is your action plan, right? High, low, mediums, right? How you approach this? You do that rating that area. So you have to assess according with that severity and velocity, right? Let's so hope we have understand now clear this you to clear. Is it clear? Hello, is it clear? Clear, sir, right? That is why be patient. That is why logically you can. I think now we have a lot of knowledge, right? So don't worry. Next day also we will support, right? But be patient, right? I want that be patient. Now you only have that's one subject to next, right? Be patient, right? This those are the risks, right? Detailed document also there I will share, right? But this quickly discuss in the summary one. That operation risk, one of the risks, type of the risk, that operation one type is fraud risk, right? The severity high. velocity high, right? What are the remedial actions you can say? But you do justification also can do the high and why high. You can say this, huge amount, 15 billion, right? So you can say like justification why you put high, right? Those are subjective, right? You can justify, right? That is why someone different answer may examiner may give the good marks, right? Where justification is there, right? So that's also I want to tell, but based on the justification, then you have to remedial action. What you have to do, this kind of fraud. Now you are just understanding segregation of duty, right? Job rotations, dual controls, establish the forensic investigation for risk management separate unit, right? Kind of this, right? Access control, lot can tell because everything I can write. A few things I put here, right? Collusion, no, there are two, three people that collusion to you. Your job rotations must, right? Some person long period is continue one position, that there is a possibility of something, right? They are routing and they are familiarized over the system and processes. They will learn very smarter way to how to bypass the control, right? That is why in a bank you can say you will happening this, right? One person without 1 month, 2 weeks mandated leave there. So without that, how run that bank branch, bank, department? So it should be right. That is there, right? You also can suggest right that also. Without that person, how can run? It should be right. You cannot survive the person, right? Like kind of bank, individual people. So it's not the matter, right? So that reputation risk, this happening now is you can think no reputation happen, downgrading this rating, right? So then proactive stakeholder communication you to need your action plan you have to communicate throughout the regulator, SEC or whatever, right? So transparent remediations, right? The roadmaps to the authority you have to share. So that is how you have to remedial actions, right? How you do this remedial action to these things. Regulator compliance. This is correct KYC, remedial sweeps, and enhanced customer due diligence, right? PEPs for political exposure people, right? All beyond the normal customer due diligence, right? This we have to do the enhanced customer due diligence, right? Rigorous way you have to check, right? With the background, those things, how connected their family members in detail, deep dive, you have to do this, right? This is the political exposures people, right? AML, CFT training, CBS, right? Those regulations, awareness, right? Those are one of point, right? Credit, capital, market, right? Risk, medium, high, you can see the investor engagement, transparency, use of proceed, pays green bond issuers, right? Now this thing happen, one of the risks, right? So that is I put purpose in this, right? Future event in the what is it called? Bond issue, right? This is a future event. These things exposing the people may not invest in your bond, right? You can quote in here, right? There is a keep in mind. That's the purpose they put. So intent to the future event. They are waiting for proposed to that green bond issue, 10 billion. But what to cover this thing exposing? So are they investing, right? Sometimes reluctant to invest, right? So that is also keep in mind, right? The liquidity constraint about the that is called FM, TFM, that is called trust fund management company, right? You have to, that is, this all company, you have to at least one, two, three selecting these things. 10 marks, you have sizable thing, you have to write at least five, two, five, six risks with the covering the, if say all entity cover. If you say two entity, my first case, I say two, three entity, right? We have to pick that way, right? That is also keep in mind. So, and the low medium, right? So this is how valuation of the disclosures, right? Trust fund management, those all are highlighted that risks are governing resources, right? So all are remedial actions also there, right? You to now understand now you get this, you to how to tackle this type of action, right? Is it clear? Right, I go to you to these things, memorize. But this I pick there in the scenario. You pick, you place in this higher, low, medium, and then you propose the regulations, right? Remedial actions, right? Clear? 9:30. Now, right over here. That's because you can now put to matrix also, right? Don't forget if you they say the put the risk matrix, you put right. That heat map. you put that, low, medium, high, and like you impact or like you put, and you mark it. Don't worry. They are looking where you are marked, right? Just you high area, like you can marking and can percent, right? That is also can do. I don't know. That will go. But if you are prepare this, no, not the big task, right? You can do it. So that is also right. So keep in mind, metrics as you go to that, picking this data to there, right? So now is the second question, right? Sorry, first one part B, right? Board oversight of the internal control financial reporting. The audit committee role. You keep in mind with the bank, even a finance, if you read the annual report separately, right? Board statement there about the internal control financial reporting, right? Even auditor separately assignment do part of the audit, internal control of financial reporting, bank finance, right? That assurance giving, right? Big role, right? That is a take of mind. Now this scenario, if you can think how is the internal control point of view, very left, right, weak, right? We will control, be patient, but in the before that, you understand, you have to write the code of best practice there, right? The board bear the ultimate accountability for the internal control. There is a board ultimate responsibility. Yeah? So no other, right? They can with the subcommittee can do, right? The board can, audit committee there are professional accounting for the member and the other member. So subcommittee true they have to do, but ultimate responsibility belongs to the board, right? That is keep in mind. Approve the risk appetite, ensure the management implementing control over journal entries and the reconciliation, suspense account, right? Even accounts putting to the audit committee, right? So they have to provide the variance analysis, right? Analytical review, and if there are high variances, you can put to the amount and above, you have to provide the reasons, right? The board can at that time with the review and can give to the audit chief internal auditor and audit department. Please look this reasons are provided by the finance is reasonable, right? So how is effectively board should have to work, audit committee, right? So that is all the people role, right? Anyone can't play the rubber stamp role, right? You are if the bank, finance, the board, you are getting direct a fee from the public deposit, right? That is have to keep in mind, much broader responsibility in terms of the public interest, right? So your loss of future may be joining the bank, finance, any position, sir. Please keep in mind, right? You are getting money from the innocent people, public money, right? That is have to keep in mind. So that is that have to pay attention, right? So there is also an addition one I want you to highlight, right? So appear these things, told at the top, absent, right? Then the multi-functions collusion indicating ethical culture was not embedded, right? Now 3 years more than fraud continue, collusion, right? That mean ethical issue in the organization, right? Board should have the required periodical cultural control environment assessment, right? And then audit committee failed to review the adequacy of the control over journal entries, take care reporting on age, reconciling item above the policy threshold, above threshold, what are the balances appearance, they are poor, challenge the management, right? That is kind of a big role to play, right? Age suspense items, this were never escalate to the audit committee and the standing agenda item for the age of the unreconciled balance should be have to be uh, mandate, right? The audit committee should have the require why the payment reconciliation had not been subject to full scope of the review of the over the 20 months, the last 2 years not review, right? Right, then now board also I can forward now here, right? Audit committee all going now. You have to keep understand now. So top you can say this is the ultimate responsibility. That is why nobody that is ultimate, right? Culture also same. I so many time tell, right? Now it's going audit committee, all the audit committee, they have a question. Why not cover this over the 24 months? The silver oversight was inadequate. The audit board, the audit committee board should periodically test the channel receive higher magnetic report directly, right? That is also checked, right? Then filtering like this. Conclusion, the audit committee oversight was not effective discharge if failed to detect the follow segregation of duty error then allowed to audit coverage gap in the high risk process, high risk areas not cover, so that you can conclude that, right? According with that, action verb, you can conclusion, you have to this kind of, you want to put the line notes, right? You reader Your exam reader, no, right? Just easy to capture, right? And your conclusion also there, your back information also there, right? So second part, that is, I say, third part C. I told this one of the technical area, right? The bank is specific internal rate risk in the bank book, right? And the economic capital, you too much want to think, but there is a question, right? I share the asset liability, how managing the bank finance. One of the question I discussed was those area is connected to here. So in trust bank face the repricing yield basis and the optionally risk from the fixed rate loan product versus deposit and bond funding, right? I sold long term with the long term, short term with the long term. Sorry, short term, right? Long term, short term with the mismatch. So there are issues, come balance sheet issues, right? So that interest those risks come, right? So your liquidity risk also lead to that, right? So ALCO should set the repricing gap limit, monitor the duration mismatch, right? Use the gap analysis with the economic value equity, sensitivity model, the stress testing. I talk about the plus minus 200, base point, how to impact, right? This performed then reported the ALCO board risk committee, right? So this in economic capital, quantity capital need to absorb the unexpected interest rate risk banking book, right? So that is the so-called ICAP. Those are very banking specific, right? Internal capital adequacy assessment process, right? Sub-business to CBS, right? Those have to do, right? Yes, economic, this called economic capital, right? Enable the risk-adjusted return to capital, risk-based capital allocation across the business line, support the risk-adjusted performance measures. Those weren't important, right? Even four, two, three, six, you are writing enough, right? I kept and all you just you have to know that, but those are the one of the central bank guideline issue, right? In the bank, so there are ICAP internal capital adequacy assessment process there, right? They do this. So in the green bond proceed, funding solar loan should be matched with the natural hedging or interest rate swap, right? To reduce the net open interest rate option. That is also need, right? Green bond, then the practical issue in matter, right? That is also connected to this. So this one of theoretical aspect in the bank to specific, right? So interest rate bank booking, right? Sometimes these things do not go in the examiner, right? But you do have to understand common sense, the bank financials, asset long term with the long term, short term with the short term, and like some I told in the explaining in the my that session revision as a theory, even a gold loan, most of the less than 1 year. So if you have to gold loan is 5 years your funding source, that means there's a mismatch, right? The balance sheet mismatch come, right? This is one of the example I want to keep, right? So that is about the C, right? That come to the D, right? Is there Karnagada? So you're okay with that? Hello, shall we continue this way? Hello, Karnagada. Hello, hello. Okay, so continue, right? Okay, right. So these are very straightforward something, right? This as to keep in mind your paper. I believe if you know this language, most of the things you can write. This level paper come this time. There is some chances. This I hope you will receive because you are a new papers come with the 3 marks, right? But this language, your vocabulary know about the advanced risk management, so you can tackle right now. These AML KYC, those have to what are the weaknesses? No beneficiary ownership identification, right? Acceptance of the large cash third-party transfer without the enhanced, due diligence, right? Suspicious transaction, no tenant risk rating methodology, right? All our scenario discuss. That is why you to receive the big scenario. So answers are there, but you to tackle them, you have to bring into the answers, right? That is you how you smart. That is the most important. No periodic refresh or ongoing monitoring over the multi-year lease terms, right? Multi-years, number of years things. No compliance officer, right? No, reporting things, right? That can see, right? If they are not even benchmark as well, no, right? So then the remedial actions, what you have to do, adopt the documented AML safety policy, appoint a compliance officer, reporting lines as well as implement the risk-based tenant due diligence, including beneficial ownership, verification and the sanction, political exposure, screening, onboarding and periodical thereafter, right? So then register as a reporting institution. So can do scope and require to source of fund, documentations, file, STR there, integrated into the group AML governance frameworks, right? AML is not only banking matter, right? That is the role of the next one, role of the chief intern auditor in the fraud risk management, right? That is also important. Now, fraud we talk, the board level role, audit committee role, right? Now is what is the role of the internal auditor? So that is talking this, right? Risk-based audit planning. That is why ensure the high fraud risk process, payment reconciliation, IT access, AML, KYC are covered with the frequency of the proportionate to risk, right? Risk-based audit planning important. If you uncovered area, you have to uncover, right? That is important. The fraud risk assessment. Periodically assess the fraud indication. Controlled overrides, informal workaround, shared credential, right, as a part of the audit scope. The independent assurance, test the reconciliation completeness, journal entry approvals, and the IT general control report deficiency directed to the audit committee, right? So based on the scenario, I am an example. Whatever you receive, you read and you can tell, right? Right, sorry, not tell, right. Investigative support, they will coordinate the forensic specialists, they ensure the finding transfer into the root cause remediation, right? That is also part of the CIE, right? Assessment, role loss, not effective discharge. That is also important. You have to say this person not effective discharge because payment reconciliation had not full scope review for the last two years, right? 24 months in 2 years. IT general control was untested and fraud was detected as the whistleblower, not the internal, internal itself not detected, right? Long period discontinued. So those are that mean internal process lacking, right? So that is how assessing the internal audit, right? Role like the new put, you can assessment also can do, right? According with the role apply to this case, you can assess whether effective role play or not, right? So IT audit scope, that is also important. IT audit is all a technologically involved system and all. So with that, so then IT controls the logical access management gaps. IT modify access right and super praise exceptions alert without independent review, no periodical user access review, right? You know, very difficult to today with laptop reading on like that smart board, right? I hope this change management gap, right? No formal change approval and testing process. IT has never tested change management control. Privilege user monitoring gap, no independent testing. Privilege user activity logs, right? Allow the IT staff and uncheck. Application control gaps, all are there, right? Exceptional automation gaps, right? Overall IT coverage was inadequate in the board. Depend on the dependent treatments, right? It was uh, so then from the finance and operation audit, enabling the fraud to continue over the three, that's a long period continue. There are, this, password change, this IT control point of view, lack of controls are reasons, right? One of the reasons. So that means lacking of the overall IT general control. Role of the chief risk officer. There is also a point because this comes from the governance, corporate governance. There is a separate session. Role of the chief risk officer. I connected to this case the independent second line oversight. Independent assess the challenge first line risk across the all three bank, fund management, property management, escalate the control breach to the board integrated risk management committee. Right, that is the role. Right, he is the person who have challenged the first line of defense. That is role of the chief risk officer, right? That is about this oversight role. Group-wide risk aggregation. Establish a group risk appetite framework spanning all the three entity. So contingent risks are identical historically. Strengthen the control environment, drive the mediation of the segregation of duty weaknesses and mandate exceptional acceleration protocol, right? So control the liquidity and capital resilience, work with the asset liability committee, Alcomin asset liability committee, yeah? ALCO and Treasury to manage the funding cost and the liquidity impact of the rating downgrade, right? Regulator and stakeholder engagement. Lead the CBL remedial plan because he's the person, right? He was connect with this action plan and drafting with the board through a communication authority, right? Coordinate with this AML and KYC remediation and rebuild the board confidence, right? The head of the green bond issuers, right? Otherwise, you can't issue this bond, right? That is why you have to rebuild that confidence. That is need, right? Because in the head of the green bond issuers, right? That is keep in mind. That is I put that word in the top in the scenario. So now we come to this one, right? Now it's a justification for the dedicated forensic audit and fraud risk management unit to the internal audit by need, right? Now is a practical question this type of can ask, right? With the knowledge you have to write, right? So you can say special skills need, cohesive multifunction fraud require forensic auditing, digital forensic investigation skills, beyond the general internal audit capability. Normal internal auditors can't do forensic audit, right? Very rigorous approach, right? In detail, deep dive, right? One of the separate skills have to build, right? So that skills separately people need, right? Normal general auditing, control testing people can't do, right? That is keep in mind. Proactive fraud risk forecast. General internal audit circle mandate is poorly suited to the continuous fraud risk monitoring and data analysis for anomaly decisions, right? These are very poorly suited. So general internal audit circle, right? So mandate, that is a routing job, no? Then branch going and checking and checklist filling, those routing role is not sufficient, right? So anomalies to detect, you have to rigorous data analytics and those in deep drive approach you have to do, right? In detail you have to think. You have to think like a froster, right? So scale and complexity, this is a bank, right? You can tell like this is over trillion billion assets, right? Public deposit. So systematically important conglomerate with the large technology driving operation, generalized solid functions cannot provide the adequate timely coverage, right? So the risk and complexity business can tell the bank need this, right? With the complexity and the public money is there, right? With the size of the asset base, independent and objective. The dedicated unit reporting to the audit committee can investigate without the complaint that arising when the generalized auditors investigate their own prior coverage. Normal other people audit and investigator people have to feel in the organization. Bank is the person auditor, right? That is feel. Normally, what happens in banks, I know this. Normally, their people sometimes come from the branch, operation side. They are coming, right? That is thing, right? With their expertise of that area. But if you are going with the, this, say, like watchdog field, not come, right? Auditor, right? You are friend is one. This is attached to is our branch department. So kind of things there, right? Even sometimes head also with the compliance department, previous attached with the other department. So then, this is not that, auditor should have that peers have to go to people, right? Even say policeman, no previous tell, but in the auditor field should have. But that field not is normal auditors not is not happening. So that is one of the things, right? Separately what need and this failure to existing arrangement, right? Is evidenced by the fraud that was discovered through a whistleblower hotline. ITC were untested in the 4 year, right? ITC General Contractor Second is a whistleblowing detected one. So the regulator expectation, right? Under the NAS CBS supervision, they established a dedicated unit, single, single credible evaluation, regulation, rating agency and investor, right? If you announce these things, regulator may have, investor may have, rating agency to show, right? We are in a position to now establishing the correct path, right? Prevent such an incident in future. You word with such a word, no, I am not here, right? Just to explain purpose, I few word here, you write like this, right? That is how you have to approach, right? Now we already complete the first question. How is the word feel? This there now 9:30 now 1 hour I can finish other one, right? I don't want to the other three, two, three, right? Those are I know I can how to discuss, right? How about feel now? Please comment. How about feel? Those are very practical, lah. One of full of practical paper. I feel first and second. Even if you can attend this, you want not the task for the 27th, right? June 27, not the big task, right? You attend and do, right? But to memorize and go, I can't guarantee, right? And attend. So, how about? Hello, comments for you. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Are you there? You're sleeping, no? Yes, right. Are you okay with no first question, right? I think 1.5 hours going. That is okay. No? You do right 50 minutes, 1.5 hours. Even I very first discussing about the other thing also. What is this video and all, right? 10, 15 minutes I took, right? Now 1.5 hours. I think you got the understanding how you approach, how you read, right? How you proceed the answer, right? Always keep a marks also, right? That you can write that way, right? And here also that way. Some few things, 4 point, right? Enough, right? 5, 6 here, right? So don't worry about that, right? So with that, hope you now have a clear understanding about the first question, right? I thought these are hypothetical things. Don't think anything identical things, right? These are world happening, right? The world I show no facts in the AC associate fraud exam and in the bank also more most of the fraud nature like this, right? So we also not people took the money from the cashier, right? Locker. Those are very stupid, people, but smart people doing this way in the things, right? That is also no. Okay, right. Now I hope you this apply to this bank in the two subsidiary. Few question I tested, right? I first asked risk identify, velocity, severity, and then you right. You can go to beyond that metrics, right? You mark in there, right? Yeah, action also there, and then come to the this other one of that don't you more focus specific industry interest rate things due to asset liability matching and alcohol and all this repricing with the coding with this keep in mind, right? And also come to the other thing, board audit committee, board role, responsibility, right? Internal financial control law, and I discuss about the role of the chief internal auditor, chief risk officer, right? So and then to the these things come to the what is called IT audit scope, right? Lot discuss emails, EFT. I told that is 90% of your syllabus. I test this question. That is only ethics matter, only not here, right? Regulator compliance there, internal audit there, advanced risk management there, corporate governance there, right? Chief risk officer role directly from corporate governance, right? Then other board responsibility, audit committee responsibility from there, right? Now we come to second question, right? So I think better to go to this these things. Some people are there, and ultimately they also repeating this something. So okay with that, this June paperwork, right? So with that, now we'll now you have option, right? Now we already completed this. Now is what is the this approach, right? Two out of the three questions should be answered, right? I told two, right? No, only two, right? So I will, this is I told you to very first you can select looking these things, right? But question asks, there are some, the familiar right area, you can mark highest what you can mark, right? And then you can select the two, right? So that is I expect. Please select the two in advance before you start in the answer, right? That is my kindly request because this is one of the it's a good approach, right? Because you want to again read the three question. Now you are also told the bulky information. Then me your time wasting, right? The examiner, I prepare this what is called paper like think like examiner, right? That is a keep in mind. Think like the examiner. Word putting, name putting, organization, right? Everything like a thing like examiner. So that is I say you do individually attend two question, two paper, right? So now we come to this one, right? So I will first like to go to the question, right? Identify the liquidity issue faced by the Connect PLC arising from the USD loan exposure and the dollar depreciation of the rupee. But this area, now rupee, dollar appreciating, these things happening now. Even I forex teaching 300, right? So your program pause this batch. Even now come to 330, 340, like going right, like that's 30, 40. Now going now that is you have volatility how is right. So those things maybe your exam may test it, right? And also supply chain resources keep in mind, right? Or most also blockade, that close and open time to time with some. I discuss this thing, right? That's also keep in mind separately sometimes they may touch that area, right? Go to risk identification question, right? And identify the weakness of the connect current ternary function and propose the best practice of the structure of the role of the ternary function appropriately for the multinational company, such as the connect PSC, right? Because I put here, this risk identification, okay, there are no, but in the there is your part in the your what is called this syllabus, the role of the multinational company test role, right? That is, I put this telco, I convert into the multinational telco with the regulator, TRC with that multinational. That is my approach. This builds this question, right? So weaknesses that current connect current treasury function and propose the identify practices, right? All the action verb already teach. That is how I come to the this paper discussion, paper exam, right? So structurally teach very first session to today, right? We have to understand how our program is structurally build the student, so not to the pass the exam, right? To tomorrow corporate leader, right? To drive the boardrooms are most boardroom are waiting for the potential corporate leaders for that purpose, that potentials to get paper is visible, paper. So paper is visible. Can you confirm? Right. Now visible, right? Okay, thank you. Right, I'm sorry for that, disturb these things can never, right? So this now we are in the second question. Now we discuss about the question, right? Just about the understanding liquidity issue and then the weaknesses of the connect current treasury function and the proposed best practice for the structure and role of the treasury function appropriate for the multinational company such as connect PSC, right? Explain the importance of the compliance with the personal data protection. Some companies such as this PSC Connect PLC and propose the role that data protection officers should perform within the content to ensure the ongoing compliance. Right? 8 marks. So state the consequences. Connect PSC may face of the non-compliance with the right. What could happen if the connect like PSC not that may face the non-compliance with the personal data protection, right? So this is okay. You to clear? Hello. Is it clear? Is it clear? Voice is clear. Now visible voice is clear. Hello. Clear, right? So this is the first. Now we are now you have understand the questions, right? Now you have to come, right? Let's connect PLC. Then we are team and all going. Don't worry about that, right? You will understand this. Connect is a Connect PLC, the multinational telecommunication group listed on the Colombo Stock Exchange and regulated by the Telecommunication Regulatory Commissions of Sri Lanka. Right? This is the company operating on the several South Asian market and is a part of the global group headed by the foreign parent company Connect share widely held by the local and foreign institutional investor. And the group is required to comply with the Code of Best Practice on Corporate Governance issued jointly by the CA Sri Lanka and the Security and Exchange Commission. So that's SECA listing rule. Those are TRC regulation. That is, I say, put this name in the PSC. I want to put due to regulator how this industry company, and then there are regulator. Those are all 50 years right company put for purpose to nature and realization purpose. Those are quoting. I disclaimer put, right? No such a company like this, right? Again, I'm telling. So part A, right? Say talk about liquidity and treasury concern. Now, over the past financial year, the Sri Lankan rupee has depreciated significantly against the US dollar. Connect had earlier obtained a substantial USD dominated loan from its foreign parent company to fund the network expansion, and the continuing depreciation has sharply increasing the rupee value of both the outstanding principals and related interest obligation on settlement date. At the same time, Connect operating a cash inflow are almost entirely rupee denominated, right? Sincerely, subscriber billing and local revenue are collected from LKR, right? That is they are revenue from LKR, right? Creating a significant currency and timing mismatch between the company foreign currency operations and the piece of domestic cash generation. As a result, Connect is facing the increasing liquidity pressures, including the delay in the settling supplier capital expenditure commitments and reduce the cash buffer to meet the short to visible right now. Right? So the treasury function operate with the no documented treasury policy, no foreign exchange hedging strategy, no cash flow forecasting model beyond the 30 days horizon, and reporting line that are informal and the inconsistent with the treasury manager reporting directly to the group CEO, right? Rather than the structure governance framework ignoring the board level, right? Board level. So that is why finance and board finance and risk committee normally say, right? Multinational, they are like say. So data breach and data protection compliance. Separately connected recently experienced the data breach in the which customer personal information, including the national identity card detail and the call record, or allegedly access without authorization. The affected customer had lodged an informal complaint with the company allegedly in the violation of their rights under the Personal Data Protection Act, submit the internal investigation relevant that the position of the data protection. So then the subsequently internal investigation revealed that the position of the data protection officer at the Connect has remaining vacant, right? That is also position also vacant for the past 3 months following the resignation of the previous officer, and the no interim arrangement were made to the resign DPO responsibility. That means DPO means data protection of the responsibility during this period. The board has now asked you, that is a different question. Huh? This type of question can raise. The board asks now, the board asks now the board has now asked you as a newly appointed risk and governance consultant, right? You are now have to think like this. You are the appointed risk and governance consultant to advise the both matters, right? First, we have to identify the liquid issues. Now this we can already discuss this question, right? So with that, now we reach to the model answer, right? Some of the answers will answer. Is it visible? Document is visible. Hello. Right, okay. Visible, right, okay. So this is this first question of the liquid issue from the USD loan exposure and rupee depreciation, right? So this is also your concern about the recurrent risk management, right? Currency translation mismatch. USD denominated loan principal and interest from the foreign parent versus almost entirely LKR denominated operating cash inflow, right? Create the open foreign exchange exposure that give that that grows in the LKR terms as the rupee depreciation, right? Currency mismatch. Currency transfer mismatch, right? That is one of the issue, right? That is timing mismatch. Settlement date for the USD obligation do not align with the LKR collection circle, stating short-term liquidity, right? So evidenced by the delay supplier and capex payment, right? Due to some settlement, you have to stop the right to existing supplier or capex payment, right? That timing mismatch. They reduce the liquidity buffer. The no structure cash flow forecasting beyond the 30 days limit. The company ability to anticipate the plan for the forex foreign exchange drive cash shortfall, right? So that is another thing. Right? Those are the issues in the liquidity point of view, right? You can understand, you can identify based on the given scenario. So what are the relevant actions? Hedging, right? Implement the foreign exchange hedging instrument. Forward contract, you can say, so you like natural hedging. So subjective, right? Natural hedging, because there are no any these things. So foreign source of dollar income, right? But there are, you can say, right? So that other case may have, you right? So USG link revenue arrangement where feasible, right? You have to look any feasible, right? For to fix the LKR cost of debt service, right? Hedging, right? You can see the hedging, one of the regulatory, the refinancing, restructuring. What you have to do? Negotiate with the parent for the extended tenure, right? You say 5 years, now here not exactly by the date, but you can say another 6 years, rescheduling, like the restructuring, refinance, all are saying same, right? Even not this, you obtain the, say like lease, like things, so you can do that. So you have but any, you can reschedule this. Finance you can't pay, until you are going to, default and legal action recovery, these things are in there. What do the finance? They say, you do 5 years now is 30,000 is difficult, but they extend the period 5 years to 7 years. So then reduce the 30,000 installment to 20,000, 18,000, right? So that is some approach, right? Practically happening, right? This is also same with the discuss with the parent, right? So let's practically explain. Then local currency borrowing to reduce the relevant USD debt, right? And the liquidity management. Extend the cash flow forecasting on the rolling 12-month horizon. Build the contingency liquidity buffer. Committed credit lines, right? And prioritize the phase caps and the supply payment, right? Those are, you have to commit credit lines, you have to, and then you have to deal with the supply, you have to whatever period, maybe 1 month, 3 months, right? Kind of with your position with the multinational, so the suppliers may flexible, right? So that is you can work in such a way, right? Liquidity management. The capital raise structure. Consider the equity injection from the parent, right? You can ask from the parent equity investment, what is right issues, and the reduce the gearing, right? Foreign exchange driving liquidity pressures, and the review the dividend policies too, right? Preserve the cash, you say the dividend policy is the parent with your company, say like say for 50% dividend, right? Ratios, dividend per share. But say don't take 50, go to 20%, right? Then you have save money. So it's not practical, right? So right issue and you can take in money, right? Parent may funding further money. So those are some capital restructuring suggestions, right? So I hope you understand, right? And then the second one is the treasury management function, weaknesses and best practices structure, right? So yeah, right. And then come to the this this is the function, right? Multinational company treasury role there you are study back, right? The big number of page, but the few page now is highlighting there are semi topic, right? So with that regard, weaknesses, what are weaknesses according with the scenario? Weaknesses is a no documentation policy, defining objective, right? Authorized instrument, what are the counterparty limits and the risk tolerance? Those are, with the key terminology, language from there, right? With the policy. No foreign exchange hedging strategy, despite material USD exposure, right? Cash flow forecasting is limited to 30-day horizon. Beyond that, no idea, right? Mitigate for the managing the currency and the capex commitment, right? So then internal informal inconsistent reporting line, that is also reporting to the, directly to the CEO, right? The board committee, no, right? Undermining the independent challenge, right? Some countries, sometimes this CEO level, management level can, say filtering can do in the treasury role, right? These things you want to, right? Like filter, you can do that if you are reporting to this thing, you are reporting there, no, right? But it's structure there, so you can go, right? So only management will report, right? Manager report direct to the CEO. So, but beyond that, right, throughout the risk committee and all, so even some monthly board meeting also, even a finance presenting, treasury, this function, treasury function, you can give update, right? So that is important. Big role in the bank, any organization, and the treasury function is critical, right? So funding management, unnecessary fund not to keep, right? Or properly managing even liquidity questions, how your payments and all projects fundings, how to do, how to financing it, right? Those are important, right? If there any question, that is also important, right? That is weaknesses existing, right? Best practice governance, treasury should be separate, operate under the board approved treasury policy or need, right? Treasury function reporting through a CFO to the board, committee is okay, right? That's why. Normally, that's this type of organization and the CFO, but this, so that going to the committee, right? Board committee, right? So that's why then with the set and monitor risk limit, then structure segregate the front office dealing and the middle office risk monitoring and compliance and the back office, the settlement confirmation, right? To ensure the independent oversight and control. That is also important treasury function, right? All function with the one person so serious, right? With my experience, even I can tell, even one of this is not the PLC, right? Right, I can tell, like those experience one of company is a private company. That treasury person, he was collude with the one of the finance person, right? If the finance person want to migrate purpose, right? Show money, right? So that treasury person who with the finance, within the finance, they are colluding that so use that company money to show money, and she was migrated and then later transferred to the organization money, right? This is how these things happening. That's a treasury is very big role, right? So that is one of practical experience, but I don't see the company, right? But a lot of experience we can share. Those are there, right? So this, to learning purpose, I see how treasury function is critical, right? So then when come to this PDPA matter, right? So this legal obligation, right? As what are the important of the PDPA compliance, like this and role, like the important why is like telco, right? That is I put to here telco, right? You're collecting information with the customers, right? Data. So most important one of the industry telco is the PDPA, right? Bank, finance, insurance, healthcare, in this one, right? This is also there, also very top line in the telco, right? So telecom operator processing the large volume of the subscriber personal data, NIC, right, call record, connected in the controller processor. I told right now you can, right, you can, some services you can this. So providing out party to, right, you can outsource, but your responsibility, your accountability, you can't outsource, right? Processor, right? With the controller, right? That is I explained. So to that point, that's one of the key word in the data protection controller and processor. Under the PDPN must comply with the data protection principles, lawfulness, purpose limitations, and data minimization, security safeguard, customer trust and reputations. Telco, telecom. So telecom data is highly sensitive, breach, error, subscriber trust and brand reputations and competitive market, right? So in the competitive markets, many trigger customer function achieved publicly and the evidence by the complaint received, right? Customer trust and reputation import, right? If these breach happen, your customer may switch to the other party, right? Definitely go, right? Because customer have so this exposing this your data is leaking, right? Not properly managing in line with the regulator requirement. So this exposure between customer may switch to the your competitor, right? Corporation risk reduction. There are robust risk data protection framework reduce the breach likelihood and limit the impact and cost of the incident, right? For instance, legal and remedial cost. Something happening, told me something happened, you have to investigate, legal fee, forensic fee, time fee, a lot of things, right? Remedial cost, right? Reductions are there, right? Role of the DPU. This is a keep in mind, now something can ask. Definitely data protection question are there, right? Now I put several question with the two paper, so you have to analyze something logically. So one of these things to help to answer in 27 June, right? That I can guarantee with data protection, anti-money laundering, right? Without who can now please latest with the new, what is the latest regulatory right implementation, right? The regulatory and compliance frameworks come, right? So with the data drive world, I explain right how critical data, even one country to other countries, starting war, previously instrument is attacked. Now today, very first attack to the data center, research centers. That is how important in data, right? So again, I remind you, right? So compliance oversight, so monitor the compliance with the PDP, then the board and management on data protection obligation and the conduct the data protection impact assessment for the new processing activities, incident response, lead the breach detection and assessment and timely notification to the data subject and the relevant authority as the under the data protection, we have deal with the authority, like there are time process, like 72 hours process, like things like reporting requirement. So new things have to, implement the regulator, protect even amendment also their data protection. So you have the officer have to communicate with the organization employee, right? Chairman to the office assistant. That awareness, one of the responsible persons is that is talking policy and training, and one of the data protection officer, right? Other than the coordinate with the authority, right? Develop and maintain the data protection policy, oversee the training, and act as a contact point for the data subject, right? Request, right? Access, correction, and right. This so with that structural point, the DPO role must be permanently filled with the clear, sufficient and interim cover arrangement, right? The 3 months vacancy without the reassessing the responsibility was itself control failure that should be addressed via the documented business continuity arrangement for the role, right? That is why. Now you are recruiting new person, not enough. If your future like this we have to documentary the business continuity arrange. There's a person is vacant period, somebody in the organization should have to look, right, until they fill that vacancy, right? It's kind of neat, right? So hope you understand, right? So this is okay, this is okay, clear, you to clear. Question 2, 3 and 4 will go faster, that is why don't worry, that's okay with you. Now it's 10:20, another 2 minutes, right? Okay, sir, right? Okay, right. Thank you for your feedback, right? So now question number 3, right? It is also different industry. So then I will just come to the question and then so to the answer, right? Then question, right? So that is called about the one stop PLC, right? Shop smart, lie better, right? So this is so there are two scenario, right? That first questions. What is A? Justify with reference to the one-stop PLC scenario why the company need to establish a board risk committee, right? Evaluate the role and responsibility of the board risk committee with reference to the code of best practice corporate governance. This the risk committee line I told in the session. Even a theory, I don't know, revision also we had that video, right? This book to book reading, ethics book and corporate governance book. So reading and myself, I tell to you to highlight, only highlight this time, no other thing. That is, I want to even effective exam, effective exam, effective session also I highlight. Preparation only highlight and underline. Don't do other things. That is want to. This also I want to mention them, right? So first role of the audit committee and responsibility topic, right? Discuss the specific role, responsibility of the board risk committee. One stop should perform in relation to the risks identified, right? Specific risk there, right? Internal review, right? Then assess the conduct of the Mr. Amasilla relation to the AI solution. Private limited quotation, right? Applying the fundamental principle, conceptual frameworks, right? This is ethical question, right? Now, previous one, I doctorate test principle, five principles. Now here also five principle thread, thread here, principles, and the other thing is the conceptual framework, right? All the ethical area cover, right? With the two paper, you can understand. The proposed key area that one stop PLC should focus on when developing the whistleblower policy in line with the issues identifying the scenario, right? Whistleblowing policy also asks, right? Now shall we read the question, right? But you can one now. I will now one time read, right? To what first one is there, the ethical part separately presenting, right? Additional chief finance officer is ethical part starting. This is one of the risk part, right? Now, shall we read, right? The one stop is a leading e-commerce platform listed in the main board and the board in the Colombo Stock Exchange. The company concerned buyers and the sellers across the consumer electronic, fashion, groceries, and the home essential through its mobile application and website, right? Mobile application and website both used for their e-commerce platform, right? And reported the group turnover exceeding 5 billion in the last financial year. One Mr. was founded 8 years ago. Mr. Supun Pereira, a visionary entrepreneur and graduate from the leading international university where he specialized in the innovation and strategic management. Mr. Pereira continued to serve as the group chief executive officer and chairman of the company, that being One Stop PLC, so widely regarded by the market as the driving forces behind the company rapid growth. That means, there are, if I read in this question, two company I can say in Sri Lanka. One of Pick Me, right? Other one is Kapruga. Those who are the entrepreneurs with them, right? With them grow this business, right? They are very unique skills, develop those two models, right? There is a Pick Me, I can say, that different point of view, and then other Kapruga, right? Those are the visionary leaders, right? So this is a separate one. I showed you to get the understanding about this wording, right? Market as driving forces behind the company rapid growth. Those people are very unique, right? To this develop this business and growing. So then their expertise and skills is important. The board of directors comprising the 8 members of the group members, Group CEO and Chairman Mr. Pereira, and 3 other executive directors, including finance director, and 4 independent non-executive directors, right? One of whom designated as a senior independent director, because the CEO chairman there, one person, right? This is okay, right? The company has established audit committee, remuneration committee, related party transaction committee, nomination committee, at the board level, right? That compulsory committee is there. However, the one list of PSA has not established separately board risk committee, and the oversight of the risk currently performing on the ad hoc basis by the audit committee alongside in the existing financial reporting and internal audit responsibility. That means audit committee do, but in the existing financial reporting and internal audit responsibility, right? That the corporate governance also say that's proposed, right? To some industry they say need, right? Bank, finance, no need to corporate governance. The central bank itself, corporate governance guideline issue with that well defined the 3 line of defines in Sri Lanka. You can find bank, finance first, right? Well defined with central bank, corporate governance. We have to tag central bank, right? Well positioning all three functions, right? Even committee also there that called integrated risk management committee, right? Board integrated risk management committee, which is bank, finance, right? So, but this is not that industry, but still looking the nature, incident also there, you can propose with the based on the corporate governance. That is my expectation, right? We are approach like this, right? This is industry on the bank finance, but in the one is stop e-commerce, technology drive business. With that, we will see what are the during the recent internal review commissioned by the senior independent director, the following matters were identified as a significant risk facing the company that are not being adequately monitored or reviewed at the board level, right? Cybersecurity and data privacy risk. The platform processes over 150,000 daily transactions involving customer payment, card data, and the personal information with the no board approved cyber incident response framework in place. You can think according with the industry most critical, right? Cybersecurity and data privacy risk. Third party and supply chain risk, increasing the reliance on the external logistic partners, technology vendors with no formalized vendor risk assessment. Due diligence process review by the board. These things normally they are not maintained the inventory. Most of them just in time. They are connecting the vendor and the customer, right? So that is why that you have right vendor party risk assessment. Those are important, right? How possible to continue to provide the goods. Your customer order place, you can't provide the goods, right? That means your reputation damage come. So that is also keep in mind. That is how supply chain risk important. Strategic and concentration risk, right? The over 50% of the GOP revenue is derived from the tree product category. That is also one of the risks, right? And management has not presented the board with the document risk appetite statement. Key risk indicator linked to the corporate strategy. We talk about the risks, not just doing risk, is linked to the corporate strategy, right? Connected key risk indicator, right? Then the KPI also connected. Likewise, the embedded, all organization connected with the risk connected with the corporate studies, right? These kind of things is not happening, right, in this organization. Regulator compliance risk, evolving data protection legislation and the consumer protection legislation applicable to the e-commerce operation. So with no compliance risk register table at the board meeting, right? That is also there. Liquidity and foreign currency risk. Significant US dollar dominant payment to the overseas technology suppliers with the hedging decisions made slowly by the CFO without board level review or challenge. You can think, right? Because no risk committee. No. So CFO level do all he or she right here, right? Say that all do not the board level review or challenge. If the board level they challenge, they review, right? It's not happen because no risk coming, right? The senior independent director has raised concern that in the absence of the dedicated board risk committee, the risks are not being systematically identified, assessed, and monitored or reported to the board. The risk oversight currently depending heavily on the information filtered through management, right? Management through, right? Filter through the management. So there is a risk point of view. Now you can understand what is organization, how nature, and what are the risks they identify separately. Cyber security, third party, strategy, the regulator compliance, right? Liquidity, foreign currency, number of risks there, right? Wait, now we read the another next one, right? So additional information. The chief financial officer, right? You keep in mind those area when I now answer in discuss. This discuss you can pick from the answer, right? Suggested answer. But in exam you have to pick from the scenario, right? That is a given mind. That is why bulky information providing those information you extract, right? Not this subject you cannot none of things you definition no things you can memorize can write no all are practical with the coding with the case you have customized answer you have provided. So this ethics matter, Mr. Amar Silla is the Chief Financial Officer of the One List of PLC and the fellow member of Sri Lanka. Mr. Silla is responsible for the group financial reporting, treasury management, and oversight of the major capital expenditure proposal, including technological investment projects. Right? One List of PLC is currently evaluating proposal to develop the new AI-powered customer recommendations and fraud detection platform. A project expected to cost approximately rupees 180 million value, right? Significant amount, right? Three suppliers submitted competitive quotation for the project. One of the three quotation was submitted by the AI Solution Private Limited, whose chief sales officer is Mr. Silva's spouse, right? That means CFO spouse, right? Mr. Silva did not disclose this relation to the board, the audit committee, or the procurement team at the time, right? Silva did not disclose this relation to the board, the audit committee or the procurement team at the time of the quotation were evaluated. And the participation in the management committee meeting that shortlisted AI solution private limited as a preferred supplier, recommending the proposal for the board approval on the basis that it is offer the most technically advanced solution at the competitive price. How is called, right? We have to say, this person, this supplier select what basis, right? This is a basis, right? A basis here, most technically advanced solution at a competitive price, right? This is how quoting. So when come to the this now is the questions, right? So we will discuss about this in the answers. So now you have understand the scenario, right? So I start very first discuss about the questions, right? With that, shall we now discuss about the. So this is from the answers, right? Very short, not like previous lengthy, right? So justification of both risk committee, right? You have to do the skills organization, risk diversity, to border the audit committee, then the risk oversight adopt, diluting the financial reporting forecast because audit committee is the financial reporting, internal controls, like right. But according with this organization, more risk areas. But if that function also do the audit committee, so you can say it is diluting the audit committee function, right? Looking this nature of this business. So then the hedging decisions, right, without board challenge, right, those are you can justify, can put, right. The cost of best practice, then support the dedicated board risk committee. So you know that suggest you can suggest the risk, what are the role in the risk committees, set the risk appetite, maintain the corporate risk register covering the cyber, third party, regulator, concentration, and the fixed foreign currency risk, right? That is how in the audit risk committee composition, that is also important, right? So that is also you can have to understand minimum three directors, members, majority of independent, right? Uh, no, sorry, majority of non-executive directors, majority of non-executive directors, chair by the independent non-executive director. I was this highlighting this, underline the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer should be required to attend all the meeting of the audit risk committee, right? That is a given mind, not invitation, right? That is different of this committee, three members minimum. So majority should be non-executive directors, chair by the independent non-executive director, then the chief, the CEO and the CFO should be required to attend all the meeting of the risk committee, right? That is also different with the other committee, right? You have to know this, right? The chief information officer and the head of the strategic business unit should be invited to attend as necessary. Both position, but necessary you can call, right? But CEO and the CFO is all the meeting attend, right? Because their output important, right? As a first line defense. So that is, I think, justification for the board risk committee and role, and we have understanding. Second is the board risk committee responsibility mapped to the risk, right? Now identify risks, they are separating those risks related to the scenarios, cyber security data. So what are the responsibility board? Approach the cyber incidents response framework, third party supply chain mandate vendor risk assessment, right? Strategic concentrations, strategic required document the risk appetite, right? Key risk indicators for the, there are parameters you can think, right? Greater than 50% of the revenue concentration, right? You can like this, right? So then regulator compliance, risk register to each uh, this board risk committee meeting, liquidity, foreign exchange, review and approve the hedging policy. CFO decision must be challenged by the committee. So that is important. The first line defense, the role I have to challenge, right? That is important for the risk committee, right? So they alone they can't work, right? That is expert knowledge. Sometimes the challenge national expert knowledge given, right? So the risk committee expertise on the risk. So he or she can give, right, with the committee can out So, good output, that the one of the resource people there. So that is the how why important, right? Hope we have understand with that now with the C, 3C, right? So 3C talk about the marks about the Amalsilla, right? Sri Lanka is this threat. What are the threat scenario? Discuss scenario in previous. Self-interested with the spouse, the chief sales officer of the bidding supplier, the family threat, principal breach, objectivity, right? So family threats come objectivity, participating without disclosing conflict, and integrity, non-disclosed board, audit committee, procurement, right? Professional behavior, conduct risk discrediting profession, right? These things are discrediting profession, right? Remedies, full disclose, the recuser, right? The aside from, right? Aside from the evaluation and recommendations, the independent committee evaluations, right? And the documentation for RPT, related party transaction review procedure. So, right, consideration also that go that but so the table can work, right? So with that whistleblowing policy, what are the key areas? Scope and the multiple considerations. What are the whistleblowing policy key areas? Scope. Whistleblowing multiple considerations. What are the scope? The reporting channel. How hotline, emails, web-based reporting. PO box, right? Like multiple sources. Even bank portals we talk. Ethical hotlines come, right? That is important, right? So discussing the prescription, right? Independent management, protection of the again the reiteration, independent investigations, escalation to the audit committee, senior independent director, board level oversight, right? Periodic awareness trainings. Those are the key areas, right? Awareness important. Whistleblowing must jam onto the this is this assistant level. All the people, organization awareness most important, right? So this also keep in mind. So with that, now we'll last question. Shall we discuss quickly, right, with the time permitted? Almost, I think, 2.5 hours, right? So with that, right, very good. Discuss, right? This is one of the NBFI, right? Non-banking financial institution, another. So this is talk about the. So it's the will directly show the. So can go to the questions, right? What are the required? Apply the suitable risk management framework, evaluate the effectiveness of the say the JK Morgan Finance risk management with the reference observations set out as a part A, right? Evaluate the effectiveness of the risk management, right? That is one of the part. Describe the role of the internal auditor in the should perform in the respect of the risk management, right? Now we talk about the cyber security and this fraud risk management, sustainability now here, risk management, right? So multiple questions cover all the areas, right? Syllabus. Your answer should also set out the what the score, right? So what's the score of the JKMF annual internal audit plan should be including as to the adequately cover the risk as the distinct area of the audit, right? With reference to deficiency identified in the part B shall be discussed and can identify and comment on the suitability of the nomination and governance committee proposal to appoint the Ms. Ajit as a chairman of the audit committee with reference to the code of best practice. That is one of the different questions. Now I explain you to explaining, but I put created that this professional body accounting member should be chaired by the audit committee. Like that, I different angle asking this question, right? Keep you to comment, right? Propose the four key areas to be board. JKMF should consider when developing the anti-corruption policy. These are the questions. So with shall we now read, right? The, so I will quickly read, right? The scenario is a finance company, JK Morgan Finance, right? JKMF is the listed non-banking or financial register. Those are in central bank is listed on the main board, and Columbus is engaging the finance, leasing, and world bank. Lending and fixed deposit mobilization, faster growing, digital micro lending app, launching the 18 month ago. The company, that is one of the good point, launching the 18 month ago, right? Micro lending app. The company operated to 64 branches and reported the loan book of 42 billion at the last financial year, and with the digital lending portfolio along with the loan growing by 165% year to year, now accounting for nearly fifth of the total disbursement. You can think this loan now, finance and all, their modern approach used to reach the customer with the technology, right? That is one of the approach here discussed, right? So loan also growth, but that health, that loan, how much go to the NPA, right? Healthy of this stock, those are important, right? So the risk point of view. JKMF board comprise 9 director, the group CEO, chief executive director, right? And the two other executive directors, and six non-executive directors, whom from including Mr. Ajit discussed the below, right? And chairman, right? Chairman also there. So are classified as independent, right? So that is how the board is structured in the JKMF. The board has established an audit committee, verified transaction review committee, board integrated risk management committee, human resource and remuneration committee, nomination governance committee. All are, this is a finance organization, all five. So it's there, right? Each governance by the written TOR, last review by the 2021. There is something, right? Gap is there, right? At least 2 years. So after review is better, right? The 2 years, there are some requirements come, right, according with the corporate governance. So something, those regulations, regulator change, have to change, right? As per a case also, right? The central bank finance business direction corporate governance required by the finance company to maintain the BRM chair by the independent, right? Those are there. So internal functions provide the independent assurance and the risk management, right, frameworks in addition to the code of best practice and corporate governance issued by this. And the second, those are all listed things are, quoted you to, realize the industry, right? That is a purpose with the fictitious company, but is quoting these again. I'm telling regulator things to you to realize this industry, right? I can't tell the private company finance, so that's not right. So they are like this, right? So this is this and comply explain all they are explaining over the fast financial year. KKMF regulator issue two supervisory letters, right? So give me 1 minute, right? So give me 1 minute, right? Even like not 1 minute, like 4 minute, 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes break, shall we continue? Right? Shall we continue? Right? This almost now 3 hours, right? So we have 3 hours, right? 2.5 hours, right? So we'll continue. So with this, so provide the independent assurance of the risk management and frameworks. Right? I stop there. For the past financial year, so JKMF regulator issued the two supervisory letters flagging the concern over the pace of the growth in the unsecured digital lending relative to the company capital adequacy buffer, and the external letter management letter separately noted the weaknesses in the IT general controls over the lending application programming interface, right, and connected the mobile app to the core banking system. Again, this backdrop, the board request to in request to independent review ahead of the next quarterly meeting. Diagnostic of the internal control environment using the COSO framework, and commission to the newly appointed chief risk officer, and the external quality assessment of the internal audit functions commissioned by the audit committee. Right? So this is one of the COSO internal control framework, CRO, right? CRO, sorry, that's the part A, COSO internal control, the CRO review noted You noted the following observation across the five components of the course of internal control environment, right? That is why bulky information this way is provided. You have to identify them, right? That is capability developed, right? So that is I asked in the paper and the first exam also say, a lot of information, right? So that's your capability to read and understand. So right. So that this case you have to understand that is one of you have to develop, right? The world approved code of conduct in 2019, right? Very long period, but it has not been refreshed since. And the recent staff survey found that 41% of the branch level employees were unaware of the whistleblowing hotline exit, right? That is what could happen when a whistleblowing. We talk this paper number of areas, right? You can understand how important exist and performance bonus for the branch managers are tied slowly to the loan disbursement volume, right? That is for this right triangle, right? So tied slowly to the loan disbursement, right? Bonus linked one of the triangle, right? Incentive pressures, the incentive come. So the possibility of the bypass, right? So that risk they are right? So then loan disbursement volume with the no correspondent risk or recovery quality metrics, right? The CRO review the fund found CRA found that at least three branches where managers had waived standard income verification checks to meet the monthly, disbursement target, right? So that is a waiver of standard income verifications. So risk assessment JKMF digital micro lending product was launched without the documented product risk assessment. Wow, that is also important, right? Documented product risk assessment is important, right? Fraud risk mapping or fraud risk mapping. You have the fraud risk map in the new product. Use the documentary product risk assessment need, right? Before introducing any product. So then the risk management division only became the way of the sharp race in the early default rate, right? First installment default right, rose from the 3% to 14% with the 6 month. Throughout that mean increased, right now, highly increased from 3% to 14%, right? Through the monthly finance report rather than the through a structural risk identification process. No priorities assessment had been performed on the API integration flagged by the external auditor, despite three confirmed cases of duplicated loan disbursement. Again, the same national identity card. In the last quarter, there's something, right? Red flags, right? Also fraud, right? Frauds is, right? That is why how your internal control is. That is what the system itself control, right? The system, how vulnerability. So, right, itself. So control activity loan approval authority limit have not been updated very long, right? 2017, despite the branch lending volume more than the you know so more than the doubling, the segregation of duty between the loan origination and disbursement in the digital app is managed entirely by the single vendor apply workflow, right? So and JKMF has no independently tested system control logic since to go live, right? So that is also and reconciliation between the mobile app ledger and the core banking system are performed manually that monthly rather than the daily basis by the single officer with no independent review, right? You can think how control lapses. Information communication risk dashboard presented to the board risk committee are complying manually in the spreadsheet by the finance divisions with the typical lag lag of 5 to 6 weeks, right? So time lag there, right? Meaning the committee. So meaning the committee is reviewing the information that is materially out of the date relative to the phase of the portfolio change, right? There is a no escalation protocol requiring management to report branch of the risk appetite limit to the board outside the normal quarterly reporting circle. Right. So monitoring activities, there's no fine formalized process to ongoing separate in evaluation to confirm that the control embedded in the digital lending platform continue to be operate as a discipline. Right. The only assurance of date into the date has been one off vendor certification provided at time of the system evaluation. findings raised by the external auditor in the prior 2 years on the branch cash management have uh, recurred, recurred in the current year of the interim review, right? Indicating that corrective action plans are not being tracks to the completion, right? Monitoring also lacks, right? There is a word cancel. It is other one internal audit function, the board composition, right? So that is also keep in mind. So following the CRO report, the board audit committee separately commissioned the external quality assessment in the internal audit function. The assessment concluded that the internal audit made by the chief internal auditor who reported administrative CEO and functioned with the audit committee with the team of 9 staff covering the 64 branches and head office performed the sound transaction level and compliance testing. That is the internal audit, not the compliance box sticky, right? And the transaction review much broader role now to play as a trusted advisor, right? I told in terms of the operational effectiveness efficiencies, the reliability of financial reporting and the compliance point of view, much broader role, right? Not the taking compliance, taking checklist boxes, right? Those are not very, this limited role, right? So that's why development and the compliance testing, annual internal risk assessment, based audit universal do not adequately cover the risk management distinct subject to the audit. In particular of the assessment found no evidence that the internal audit has ever reviewed the designing or operating effectiveness of the company. This not the review, the ERM framework, right? Effectiveness and the effectiveness operating and effectiveness, and designing and operating effectiveness. The risk appetite statement or the second line of expansion itself and the current 3-year audit cycle allocate only the 4% of the total audit hours to the risk management. That is one of the lacking. The related engagement again the peer, right? Competitors in BFI center benchmark say like this, and as per this question, say approximately 15%, right? That is also like separate the chairman of the board audit committee. That is different question. No? Now you to say like first in the course of 5 control weaknesses and then audit committee lacks, right? Discuss. Now here discuss about the board audit committee, right? So that is to keep please listen carefully, right? One of the critically challenging way I build up this question. No? So separate the chairman of the board audit committee is an independent non-executive director who has served the board for 6 years, will turn to 70 years of the age in the coming month, right? That means the listing you 17 years age, they call no independent, right? There are independent lapses, right? Now existing chair, that means according to scenario is lapse, right? Which under the JKMH board charter, the listing role require him to step down from his committee chairmanship at the next annual general meeting. The nominations and the governance committee, in preparing the succession recommendation to the board, has proposed that Mr. Ajit, we discussed in top right, as say the comment to the below, right? The Mr. Ajit is independent non-executive director. He's an independent director currently serving as member of the audit committee, be appointed to the new audit committee chairman with the immediate effect from the next board meeting. That is one of the proposed, right? That is one of the proposed session proposed for the session recommendation from the board, right? Nomination and governance committee, right? Mr. Ajit background, we have to look at Ajit committee with the immediate effect from the next board meeting. Mr. Ajit is a professor in the finance, right? Professor of the finance. He's a professor in finance. That means respectable. You can't reach highest in the finance, in the academically very highest person, right? He has a prominent state university in Sri Lanka and all the BSc special accounting from the same university, right? He has served on the JKMF board for 2 years, right? Sits on no other listed company board and has no prior experience chairing the board committee and in the finance or other, right? Otherwise, and the no nomination and governance committees prepare committee paper to the boards state that, but in the committee paper, right, the nomination and governance committee paper, the board state that Mr. Ajit academic standing in the finance and in his existing familiarity with the audit committee work make him the natural and most convenience choice, right? That is made to the recommendation, the academic studying and with 2 years work, right? Community of the audit committee. The recommended that the appointment of be ratified without the border search of the or formal fit and proper assessment given in the proximity of the outgoing chairman retirement date, right? So there is a keep a mind, right? Now we have to keep a mind this scenario, right? We will how this apply to question, how to answer, right? Now shall we discuss about the suggested answer in the not summary answers, right? Suggested summary answers, right? So now hope you have clear about the this JKMF, right? JK Morgan Finance scenario. Discuss what questions asked. Also, right now we will look how this answer built according with the scenario, right? So now is the this questions scenario COSO framework, right? This is a very summary type, right? Due to now with the time frame, so we will discuss about this, right? So further you can embed it, you can incorporating the scenario case, right? Key point time here, right? Key point, right? Course of framework evaluation, control environment. We, unreplaced code of ethics, last revised in the 2019, 41% of the branch staff unaware of the hotline, you know, silver hotline, voluntary only the incentive matters, right? Cultural those are so this framework point of view, a control environment, you can assist, right? Weak those are control environment weak, right? Reasons are here, right? The risk assessment also weak due to digital lending launch, without risk assessment or fraud risk assessment, right? Early default rate raise, increase from the 3% to 14% detected via the finance reporting, right? Not risk process, right? Those are the risk assessment weaknesses, right? According to the scenario we discussed, control activity approve limit unchanged from the 2017 despite double volume, right? And then monthly manual reconciliation by the single officer with no independent reviews, right? Those are control, no segregation, right? Right? Make a checker, right? Make a checker, right? Even a banking financing, make a checker, right? That segregation is important. Make and checker, right? No such a control here, right? So information and communication weak. 5 6 weeks dashboard lack, right? No escalation protocol outside the time you can't report, right? These things like lacking of the information dashboard lack, right? No escalation protocol outside the quarterly circle. So monitoring weeks, ongoing evaluation of the digital platform controls, uh, recurring external audit findings, those they are regularly reporting each, management letter repeating. So that means the monitoring effect ineffective, right? So then digital platform, then recurring external auditor findings, not track or closer conclusion, right? No, not closer look, right? Even internal to have look the external auditor findings, right? With their audit, they can check, right? Review. So that is one of the internal auditor role, right? Management. And audit committee can give to the internal auditor comment about the sometimes management report email, right? Practically management put correct these things, doing these comment put right time frame have to put. In the practically it is the done. So they did the proper action. They did right proper action they took. So internal department independent reviewer can give to the audit committee. Right? That is how monitoring broader can do, right? So then in the conclusion, all five causal components show the material inconsistency and deficiency, right? You put the conclusion also there. Now internal auditor role in the audit, role of the risk and then role internal audit role and audit plan scope. Role independent assurance to the ERM framework, designing and operation effectiveness. That is one of the role. Review, review the adequacy of the risk management division. Never previously reviewed, right? Those are trust, right? Assurance of the risk appetite frameworks. Those are the part of the internal auditor role, right? Scope. What are the how to at the scope? rebalance the hours from 5%. Industry best practice according to scenario 15%. You have to increase risk management point of view, hours allocation, right? 15% of the your risk plan, risk plan, risk management engagement, and digital lending, apps and IT and application controls and the reconciliation, segregation of duties, testing, right? Build the formal tracking for the prior audit findings that I discussed previously with the external audit management letters, how to that findings, how to formally tracking and update report given to the state of the current audit committee, right? Those are all right. Preserve the functional independent from the CEO, right? That's according to case, no any, these things, barrier from the CEO and no reporting structure good, but sometimes with the working, some can come pressure, right? Without that pressure, have to perform the internal auditor, right? So then Ajit matter, right? This Ajit ethics matter. Now we discuss the last 2 point, right? So already now 3 hours reached, right? So I think well effective, right? If you do two papers, well broader areas, your syllabus, right? I discuss, right? So that is why Mr. Ajit, in the audit committee chairman, right, this matter. So this is not the ethic matter. Sorry, yeah, I mistakenly told this is one of the this audit committee chairman matter, right? So that is I want to I even explain, but in this two thing, but now I this put into question you to further get the understanding, right? The independent satisfy, he is the okay independent director, but expertise, what is expertise questionable, right? Academic standing does not equ- equate to the recent or relevant practical audit committee expertise, right? No latest financial reporting experience, the bank is a finance company. IFRS 9 should be no, right? Other than how? So other than the committee may be blindly approved, right? You can't management can't challenge without knowing of the especially finance company IFRS 9, right? One example I'm telling. But looking this Ajit, this academic study that recent and latest financial reporting. So so we can assume, right, lacking of that experience and no serving other bank or finance, right? You can so put comment right that, right? That is also justify, and also that this recent relevant practice committee and explain that the court expect to, right? The audit committee chair should be a member of professional accounting body, right? That is a must, right? This should be, right, as per the second best practice board, right? But here, academic study. So you have to comment that. So that is one of, right? You have to bring in that book, theory to practical, right? You can understand how I build this. You have to answer this accounting body, right? The experience of fire committee. Those you can justify governance concern for the regulated in BFI, those are not aware, then process concern, appointment by the convenience without the fit and proper assessment, right? Again, the code, listing rule, you have to appointing, you have to look, right? Multiple things, even a bank finance, not like, say, listing rule, even a central bank, corporate governance, right? So a lot of things have to look, right? So in considering with the good governance, nomination governance, committee should conduct the proper assessment, right? That is why. So that is neat, right? So that is the conclusion. You have comment, you have looked at all the what is his capacity, what is the requirement according with the listing rule. You can go code best practice corporate governance, right? That is how you comment, right? Broader you have to look, right? Not just say as per this should be like this, right? All fact you have to summarizing, you have to extracting from the scenario and you have to comment, right? Keep in mind, this is the last point. The anti-corruption policy, key areas, you can understand in general knowledge, you can write this. Clear prohibition and definition of this need, policy, what including area, clear prohibition and definition of the bribery, corruption, gift and hospitality roles and facilitating payments, right? Due diligence over the third parties, and again the vendors and agent and vendors, right? Whistleblowing and the investigation procedure with the protection for the reporters. What are the whistleblower protection? That is important. Right? Some employee, I told organization thing, he or she, if something wrongdoing is come forward and disclose, he or she think is my job is loose, my life is loose. He or she may come and disclose, right? No, right? That is protection should be itself, right? Even anti-corruption, right? Also, right? in the organization, right? Something throughout the anti-corruption things come with the whistleblowing, right? Can do connected, right? So training, awareness, those also important, anti-corruption, right? So one of the two policy, mandatory policy need by the PLC in the listing role is one of the policy, right? I teach already anti-corruption policy, right? Keep in mind. So investigation procedure with the protocol report, the training, monitoring, and the board level reporting on the anti-corruption compliance with the sanction and the right own branches, right? That is need. Okay, these areas we have to incorporate in the anti-corruption policy, right? Your point is mentioned enough. You go 3 marks. Your 3 point is three additional one, right? Four, right? Enough, right? So how to define these things, right? Give acceptance policy, corruption, what is corruption, and then austerity rule, working with the vendors and agent, and how the investigation things happen, protocols, right? Training and awareness, monitoring, so those is enough, right? So with that, I think conclude, right? Fourth question discussion. So hope you clear, right? This so now I think almost 3 hours. I think well effective, right? Well effective 3 hours for you too, because this is so we already theory program 5 months we completed with the parallelly conducting the revision session and the two mock paper, right? First mock paper already share with you, and then this is the second. So all I describing that hypothetical bill, 50 years campaign name, please again I quote, right? So is regulator bodies are quoting for the you to naturally get the understanding about the industry. That is the only purpose. Again, I'm quoting here, right? So I want to tell, please, student, so my first paper and the second paper, please, you have to logically think and apply, right? Next 2 days now, we have times because all the areas, only one areas I can say like this, this is the risk management point of view, budgeting in the risk management area in a few area, but there is, I think, question from the final paper also, right? That is small with the knowledge by theory and revision did you can handle, but I don't put the question to here, but all the area cover, right? Now you to leisurely sit and logically analyze this paper, read the most excellent say, now they already said last Sunday, right? They say a lot of information, right? You to read a lot of time, right? That is how expertise develop how to general information capture, right? With the very first information, organization, industry, regulator, these things knowledge you one time enough. Then you directly go to the scenario base and so answer according to the scenario wise. Unless first part may ask multiple risks in the diversified organization, we have to read, right? That is only others. You specifically go the relevant content and read and answer. That is my suggestion. So with that, I hope our program with the theory as well as the student, a lot of works. I told this program not beyond the 50 marks, right? You to develop in the future corporate leader, right? It's ethical leaders, right? So handling the future business corporate need to future leaders, right? With that, so I will conclude. Wish you all the best, all the students. So, but starting with the showing video, like I hope when we are next 2 months in the result is showing, so we will get the good news and good result, right? You'll be happy, and finally I want to so become a chartered accountant in 1 year, 2 years. That is my session. So as a you person, as well as you serve to the nations, do the right. So it is a good service to the nation, right? So that is so my final thought about. So with that, I will conclude today's session. So next 2 days, like leisurely. Again, I'm telling do two paper, analyze, read the question, understand, and your own please write point form, right? At least 3 hours you can do because don't read the question itself and the answer and go to the exam. That is something killer strategy, right? So first time you are answering the exam, something risk you with the your subject. I want to tell you additional risk you will take, right? So if you do in advance, see you also did mock paper, you can do two mock paper at any other places classes, you take it, right? You are trying connecting and do practice and go exam. Then you are in the your exam stress. is reduced, right? So again, finally, I wish you all the best, all the students. So thank you. Thank you for participating this session also.